اوكي بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Thank you all. Thank you so much for joining us, for joining our virtual workshop on educational leadership. This workshop is part of the activities of our WHO Collaborating Center for Health Professional Educational Development at the College of Medicine and Medical Sciences, Arabian Gulf University, Bahrain. It gives me a great pleasure to welcome Professor Stewart Menen. Professor Menen is an Emeritus Professor of Cell Biology and Physiology at the University of New Mexico. Professor Menen is the Principal of Menen Consulting and Associate, New Mexico, and is the Consulting Associate, Human System Dynamics Institute, Minneapolis, Minnesota, USA. Also will join us in this workshop, Professor Odeh Al-Jayyousi. Professor Al-Jayyousi, he is a Professor of Innovation and Technology, Management Department, Arabian Gulf University. Professor Al-Jayyousi is an international expert in urban planning, energy policy, sustainability, and innovation. Professor Menen, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaykum assalam.
I am very, very pleased to be with you this afternoon and to share this time together in a very important subject, in a very important time in our lives. We are living in a time of uncertainty, and how we work together and how we lead and organize is critical. And more so than ever before, the decisions we make have huge, big consequences. And so I'm delighted to share this time with you. I'm speaking to you from Sao Paulo, Brazil. I came to Brazil in 2004 from the United States. I have been living in Brazil since 2004. I was invited to Brazil by the Ministry of Health as a consultant to help revise the health professions education programs for Brazil. I thought I would be here for 2 years, and now 17 years later, I am still here. Life is always a surprise. You never know what will be in for you. And so I am very pleased to have worked in medical education. I am now more than 40 years as a professor in medical education, and originally as a professor of anatomy. My specialization is anatomy, and my research specialization is reproductive neuroendocrinology. This is how I was trained and developed. And then I switched to become a medical educator early in my career. So my background is in science and research, and I changed my career very early at the University of New Mexico and became a director of medical education, and found that that was something that I wanted to do. And so I've been involved in change and leadership. In fact, the University of New Mexico School of Medicine was a WHO collaborating center in community-oriented and problem-based learning. So I was director of a World Health Organization collaborating center for almost 20 years. And so I very much appreciate this opportunity to come back and work with you. What I want to talk about today, what I want to share with you today, is my experience in working in organizational leadership and change in health professions education. And I want to cover a lot of territory, and I hope that we can share. I will begin by sharing my screen and tell you that this is a topic that has occupied my interest for some time. Leadership, change, and development was a subject that I was involved in as a scientist, as a research fellow, as a student. I've always been interested in change. Change is going on all the time, and we are always either trying to make change or to stabilize what we have. And so somewhere in between, we are living in the moment. And so I want to begin by asking the question, why are we here today? And what is it that we are seeking to do? Why are we here? Who are we together this afternoon? This group that comes together? Who are we and what are we about? What will we do together today? And really, what is important to you? What's important to us? What's important to this afternoon? And what will you do to bring about leadership, development, and change where you work, where you are now? And so this will be a very practical, a very applied workshop. I want you all to participate. You will not just sit quietly and listen. You will be engaged. We will have breakout rooms. We will have questions and answers. And I would like several opportunities for you to unmute your microphone and to speak or to write in the chat space. If you're not familiar with Zoom, I assume most people are familiar with Zoom, but just in case, there is at the bottom of your screen, there should be an icon that says chat. And you can open up the chat space and write questions and comments. And you can communicate with each other as well in the chat space. So now what will we do? How shall we connect with each other? What will we do next? What will you do next? And so my interest today is in building adaptive capacity. I view leadership as an adaptive capacity. It's not something that's fixed. It's not something that's stable and steady all the time. It's in constant development. And so to build adaptive capacity in leadership and education, and to find your next wise action in turbulent and uncertain times, this is the purpose of today's workshop. We all have challenging issues we are facing all the time. We have many at the same time. And so how to take action to tame what I will call sticky or wicked issues. I use the word wicked not to be evil or bad, but to mean difficult to solve, actually without a solution. There are many, many problems that we cannot solve, but we can manage. We can deal with them. And we want to today to learn simple processes that cut through the complexity and learn to practice what we will call adaptive action. Leadership is an adaptive process. We are constantly dealing with new situations and adapting and learning as we go. So the situations that we are dealing with are complex. Whenever you are dealing with human beings, the situation is complex. And we will use specific models and methods in what is called human systems dynamics. Human systems dynamics is a field of study at the intersection of physical and biological and social sciences. So we say plan when you cannot predict or control, and take action in uncertainty, and collaborate in complex issues, and communicate effectively in what feels like chaos. And so I want to establish some core principles at the very beginning for us to work together and for you as leaders in what you do. For example, how we work together today, and how I think you should be working together with your colleagues and your institution and with others. Leaders stand in inquiry. Leadership is primarily about learning. Every action you take is one in which you learn the consequences and you learn the impact of what you do. So leaders that stand in inquiry need to turn judgment into curiosity. These are four very important guidelines for leadership. I don't mean judgment in making a decision about who receives a prize or who is promoted. I mean, when you interact with other people, you form opinions very quickly. And the idea is in leadership to avoid judgment and to sustain curiosity as you go, to turn conflict into shared exploration. This is an essential aspect of what we do. It's part of medicine, it's part of health professions education, and it's part of human interaction. Shared exploration is always more productive than conflict. To turn defensiveness into self-reflection, to be aware of your own reaction to situations and to reflect and to think carefully, and to finally, something critically important in science, in medicine, in education, and especially in leadership, to turn assumptions into questions. To examine your assumptions is foundational. It's to be a critical thinker and to be an effective leader. So I want these four concepts: judgment to curiosity, conflict to exploration, defensiveness to self-reflection, and assumptions to questions, to be foundational and essential in what we do together today and what you do on a daily basis in your leadership.
Excuse me, Professor Menen, we can see two screens, actually two slides. Could you please make it only the slide you are speaking in?
I will fix this. Thank you for, I didn't know what you were seeing.
Oh, thank you.
Just one moment. How is that? Is that better? Is that better now?
Yes, Professor. Yes, Professor. Yes.
I want to do something now on my screen. Tell me if you see two or one now. How many do you see?
Two slides. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So I was using presenter mode. So today what we're going to do is going to explore a useful definition of leadership. There's many misconceptions about leadership and what it is and what it isn't. So we're going to explore today what it is. We're going to use inquiry, what I just mentioned, 4 approaches to inquiry. I'm going to talk about finite and infinite games, a way to look at reality, a way to look at the world and to make decisions. I will speak about and introduce you to adaptive action, the way to go forward when you don't have an answer, when you're not sure, when you're faced with uncertainty, you take adaptive action. To look at complex issues that you are dealing with, how to open up complex issues and understand them to make wise decisions. To look at the interactions that we have as complex. If time permits, I would like to use what's called a decision map, because leadership is about making decisions, and how we choose to make decisions, what informs our decisions is really important. The process of change is a constant. Change is the only constant in the universe. Change is happening all the time. As hard as we try to keep things the same, they change all the time. The earth, every day the sun comes up, it's a new day, things change. And finally, I want to talk about how to develop leadership capacity at your institution. So I want to begin with a question. And to answer this question, I want you to participate. If you look at the top, if you look in the chat space, let me open the chat space. I'm going to put into the chat space a link for you. Just one moment. I'm going to ask 3 questions. And what I would like you to do is to click on the link, question number 1. And question number 1, it will bring you to this question: how many years have you been teaching health professions students? So click on this link. You will see the question, and you'll have the option to answer this question: 1 to 5 years, 6 to 10, 11 to 20, more than 20 years. So open this link from the chat space. So open the chat space at the bottom, and you should see this link, these 3 links.
Prof. Menen, I think I should copy paste it to everyone because you just sent it to me. Wait.
Okay, hang on. Just
I'll share it with everyone now.
Okay.
Okay.
Is it to everyone now?
No, we can't see.
Just one moment.
Please.
How about now?
Yeah, okay, yes.
Yes.
So you see these links. On question number 1, click the link, and you should see a multiple choice question that you can answer. Choose an answer and click submit. And hopefully the answers will show up on our screen and we can see the results together. How many years have you been teaching in health professions students? Do you see the question?
Yes, we can see, yes.
Okay, so please answer the question and click submit, and hopefully we will see the results.
I'm sorry, I get the message saying that access is denied.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry that that's happening. So if you cannot, is that true for everyone?
I get a different question, actually. It's are you a leader or something like that? It's a different question.
Me too. I've got the multiple choice. Yeah, I got the multiple choice.
Okay, so the question I have for you is this: how many years have you been teaching professional students? And you can put your answer in the chat space. You can write the number of years that you've been teaching in the chat space. Just put a number into the chat space. For example, I have been teaching health professionals more than 20 years. How many years have you been teaching health professionals?
Excuse me. In the chat, we cannot actually put to everyone. It's only restricted to only 5 people.
You can change it now, everyone.
Yes, I changed the settings now. Now you can share, Dr. Yassin, because I'm receiving the answers myself.
Do you want us to send it to everyone?
Everyone now is there, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, please. Sorry about that.
Everyone should put their teaching years into the chat space. So I'd appreciate if everyone participates. You can see that we have a fairly experienced group. So there are a few people that are 5 years, 1 to 5 years. And most people are more than 5 years, 10 years and more, 11 to 20, and more than 20. We have some more than 20. We have one professor who's said that he's been teaching 40 years, Professor Khalid. So we have a lot of experience and a lot of knowledge, a lot of know-how in the group. I would like to go to the next question. Excuse me.
I wrote it, but it didn't come up. I'm very close to Khalid, I think, 38 years. Khalid, how are you? It's good to see you.
Yes. Thank you. I'm fine. I'm fine. How are you?
Good. And
the second question is, I am a leader because, and we can see some of the answers. So this question is working. I am a leader because I was appointed or elected to this position. I assume this role because it was needed. I don't have a leadership role at this time or some other reason. So most of you were appointed or elected into a leadership role, which is the most common situation. Those people that assume the role of leadership have a much more difficult challenge on their hands than those that are appointed or elected. And leadership is always challenging. So I want to go to the next question. And this is for you to write your answer. If you cannot write in the space and submit it, then I would like that you write in the chat space. What questions do you bring to this workshop about leadership?
You cannot see the question.
Do you see the question on the
No,
screen?
I don't see the question either.
Is that true
Yes,
for
we
everyone?
can see.
Yeah, it is. We can see the presentation with the question.
What questions do you bring to this workshop about leadership? If you cannot respond directly, then you can write in the chat space. I'm very curious to know what questions you are holding at this moment. What are the questions in your minds about leadership? And I try not to say, I want to be a better leader. Everybody wants to be a better leader. I want a more specific question, not how can I be a better leader? What specific questions do you bring about leadership? So what are the specific educational skills? How to motivate people who do not want to deliver and meet with expectations? Types of leaders, how to be a good leader. We all want to be good leaders. How can I reflect on my leadership? Thank you, Yasin. More of you. I want more responses, please.
I'm still receiving the answers myself, so please, professors and doctors, can you change the setting and send it to everyone? Unless you want me to read it out loud.
I sent it to everyone, but it wasn't read. I'm not sure whether you saw it or not. My question is, what are the specific educational leadership skills as opposed to organizational leadership skills? What is so specific about educational leader as opposed to other leaders?
Yes, thank you. Excellent question. I'm waiting to see the other answers. Now answers are coming up on the screen. So the system working is just slow. The question is how to cope with requirements and skills of a leader in times of fast and unpredictable change. This is the subject of this workshop. How to maintain a balance between a leadership role, academic role. Yes. How to manage conflict. Absolutely. Leadership success depends on the role and responsibilities. There is no one measure fits all. Absolutely correct, Professor Maria. Involvement of my faculty in different activities. So what you're seeing, is that there's no single answer and that everyone wants to be able to deal with uncertainty and conflict. And just one moment, I want to sort through. So sometimes we say that leadership is like something else, that is a metaphor for leadership. Can you think of a metaphor for leadership? Leadership is like a flower. It opens up into something beautiful and then it wilts and dies. Or leadership is like a buffet. You can come and choose. What is leadership like for you? Leadership is like, and then fill in the blanks. Think of a metaphor that embraces leadership as you understand it, your concept of leadership, your perception of leadership. Leadership is like, and then write your answer in the chat space. Leadership is being a role model for positive change. Yes. Leadership is like, it's a metaphor, moving people forward. Leadership is an opportunity to make a positive change. Leadership is to empower, to enable others. Leadership and emotional intelligence. Leadership is about guiding people towards a common goal. Leadership is role modeling, directing people, and organization flexibility, adaptability to change, inspiring trust, enabling others to achieve results under complex conditions. Yes, leadership is all of these things. And here's my metaphor, that leadership is like playing the violin, learning to play the violin in public and learning as you go along. So when you begin to play the violin, you'll sound terrible. And as you practice over the years, you get better. So for me, leadership, being a leader, is like playing the violin in public and learning as you go along, because leadership is developmental. None of us comes into leadership already preformed and effective and perfect as a leader. We are all learning as we go along. So leadership is developmental. Prof. Marwan, playing the violin without music, playing by ear. So leadership is transformative, it's developmental. And here's my definition, my understanding of leadership. I want to give a definition of leadership, but I want to say that leadership is not inherited. To be a leader doesn't mean that you have leadership. There are many people who have leadership positions who are not leaders. Many people have leadership positions that are not leaders. Leadership is about learning and making sense and taking informed, wise action. Yes, like Jenny Liu says, leadership is like a symphony conductor. Leadership is about learning and making sense, taking informed and wise action. And it sets conditions for patterns of learning, innovation, and productivity in an organization. What are the conditions for patterns of learning? I'm talking here about patterns of learning because leaders are really teachers, and all teachers are really leaders. I'm going to spend a lot of time in this workshop talking about patterns. Patterns are really important. Leadership helps people to perceive, understand, and take action to influence conditions in which they live and work. Leaders stand in inquiry. They are curious, they're reflective, they turn assumptions into questions, and they turn conflict into shared exploration. And leadership promotes self-organization, the ability to bridge the gaps between where people are now and where they want to be. So leadership is really about setting conditions for people. Under what conditions do leaders work? There's three kinds of, there was an article in last week's Science Journal, which I was reading about inflammation. The current issue of Science is about inflammation, and they describe inflammation as having three kinds of functions, inflammation. It's very interesting that inflammation, like leadership, is a response to disturbance or perturbation. So what you do as a leader is often you respond to disturbances, you respond to changes in situations. The second thing you do is sometimes you're just engaged in leadership as a multi-step process. You begin, you do one thing, you do another thing. It's a constant unfolding process. And the third state of leadership is that's part of the system. The system is set up so that there's a rector, a president, a vice president, a dean, that the whole system is set up with leadership in place, and it just functions as a system. and that it just goes along. So the first take-home message, the first thesis about leadership that I want to share with you is called Infinite and Infinite Games. This is developed by a man named Kars. That there are two kinds of games, two kinds of situations in leadership. There are many situations, but fundamentally there are two types. One is called a finite and certain game. And it's a lot like football, in which there are specific rules and times and players and things you have to follow. And then there's uncertain times in which you're sitting around and it's constantly changing. It's adaptive. The rules are not fixed. So in a finite game, there's a field of play. There are opponents, there are rules, there are expertise, and the purpose is to win. The purpose is to win, to get the most money, to get the most students, to get the most space, to get the most votes, to get the most of something. The purpose is to gain the most. Whereas in infinite and uncertain games, the boundaries are not clear. Every player is involved. The rules change all the time. You want to see what's fit, what works, and the purpose is not to win, but to keep playing. The purpose is to keep the game going. If you think about leadership, effective leadership, the purpose is to keep things moving forward. So I want to explore this concept with you. If we look at finite and infinite games, here are two images about leadership. In one, leadership, let's see if this is going to work. In one, leadership is like tennis. The object is to win. Watch this. Object is to win. To be the best.
The crowd remember. He can do it all, can he? This is ridiculous.
The purpose of leadership that's finite is to win, to be the best. Now here's another game where the object is different. See if you can see what the object of this game, what's the purpose of this game?
Ones, dois, três. Chegou, chegou.
What's the object of this game? It's to keep playing.
Keep playing.
This is the object of leadership, is to keep the game going. This is the lesson of effective leadership, is to keep the game going. You don't want things to stop and be completed. In health professions and in education, education doesn't stop. The game keeps going. Health doesn't stop. The game keeps going. Health professions education doesn't stop. It keeps going. Certainly, there are situations where you need to make a finite decision in a budget or in a course design, where you make finite and very clear decisions. But most of the decisions you make, most of the situations you face are like this, where the object is to keep the game going. Let's take a deeper look at finite certainty, where the object is to win. I want, and you want, every pill in this box to be the same. You want all the pills to have equal amounts of substance in them. You want the same dose of vaccine that you take. You want the same dose for everyone. And you expect the same dose when you go. When you look at tissue under the microscope, when you look at organisms, you expect to see that the slide will not be changing as you look at it. You expect that when you add your budget, that the number at the bottom will not change every time you add the budget to the bottom. You expect that in a checklist, you check off what goes on. In a contract, the terms of the contract stay constant. You expect that the indicators in the coronary cycle, cardiac cycle, will stay the same, that you have aortic pressure, you have pulmonary pressure, you have heart sounds. You expect the design of the curriculum to have modules that go from one module to the next to the next. So these are certain. The boundaries are clear. Think of your leadership situations that are certain. The boundaries are clear. There's a beginning and an ending. The rules don't change in the middle of the game. There are known participants, that we know who the players are. And there's a single measure of success, and especially that expertise is useful. The object is to give the right answer, and the purpose is to win. These are finite, certain games. So there's a certain kind of leadership where this is what is called for. And so examples in leadership are to make a vision, to have outcomes and objectives, to have a scorecard. In health professions education, to have tests, to have competence criteria, to have simulations. In health practice, acute care, predictable, repeatable situations, and best practices. So this is what certainty looks like in leadership, in health professions education, and in health practice. So the known diagnoses. In assessment, here I recently came across an article that talks about competence and performance. In assessment of students or an evaluation of programs, competence is finite. Competence uses available technology, has reasonable costs, traditional methods. It's just like a finite game. The expertise is most important. Logic is important. Quantitative, descriptive data is useful. It's very finite assessment, except when it's not in the clinic, and sometimes it's uncertain. So we live in situations where we need finite leadership. What does infinite leadership look like? Well, we have the pandemic, leadership in the times of pandemic. Working in a health team or working in a teaching team is uncertain. You never can be quite sure what's going to happen next. And every time you do it, it's different. Public health, which should be more certain, is turning out to be uncertain. Working in a intensive care health team with pandemic, with COVID, is filled with uncertainty. Working with things like cancer and other forms of illness that are uncertain. Human relationships, completely uncertain. There's no formula for your relationship and with your family or with your colleagues. There's no specific thing that you follow every day. Working at the bedside, it's improvised. It's filled with uncertainty. Culture, this is a Native American from the Southwestern United States, speaking with a shaman, a native healer. And finally, mental health is filled with uncertainty. So uncertainty has open and shifting boundaries, no clear end. The rules change all the time. Everybody's involved, not just a few people. There's multiple kinds of success. Expertise is not particularly useful. That the most important skill that a leader exercises in uncertainty is to ask questions that are useful, to find a fix that fits the conditions. And the purpose is adaptive action, or to keep playing. So uncertainty requires a different kind of leadership than certainty. Uncertainty requires, I'm seeing a message that says the slides are out of focus. Is that true for all the slides? Because I see them in focus.
No, it's good for me.
I can see them.
It's
okay.
good.
That's uncertainty.
Clear enough. It's clear enough.
I'm sure that the slides are clear. I'm sure that this next slide will be uncertainty in health professions. I'm not sure what you think. I'm not sure how this is what you're thinking about at this time. But I know that uncertainty in leadership, it certainly involves the pandemic. There's ethics, there's empathy, there's innovation. Those of you that are interested in changing your curriculum or changing your program or involving how to motivate workers or participants, how to lead, it's filled with nothing but uncertainty. The pandemic, inquiry, relationships, clinical experience, palliative care, interdisciplinary teams, patient experience, your health and your family. Doesn't it seem like most of life is uncertain, and that uncertainty is the rule and certainty is the exception? I think that certainty is the exception and uncertainty is the rule. And so, what's the most common mistake that people make is they confuse certainty and uncertainty. The most common mistake that people make is to try to push the donkey or to try to push other people to do things. So when you have an uncertain, infinite situation, you cannot make it infinite. You cannot break down an infinite situation and make it finite. You cannot reduce complex problems and solve each piece one at a time. This is a very important understanding and change in if you think that your approach to leadership is to break everything down and solve each problem one at a time. When you go back to the whole, nothing is the same. You have not really achieved anything. So it's an illusion that you can break things down and solve complex problems that way. This is a mistake. You will spend your resources, your time, and your intellectual and emotional capital and not achieve the results you want. This is a mistake. The most important thing you could do is know when a situation is finite, the criteria I gave you, and when a situation is infinite. And when a situation is finite, you make a decision, you distribute resources, you appoint people, you set the agenda. When the situation is infinite, you try to keep the game going. So when you're facing uncertainty, which is most of the time, these are some of the questions you need to ask as a leader. What are the three most important things about the present that I'm facing right now? What are the three most important things? It's really important that when you're doing leadership in uncertainty to not jump to an answer very fast. Stay in uncertainty. It's not going to kill you. Stay in uncertainty and think things through. What are the three most important things? What do you want to be the same after you make a decision, and what do you want to be different? Some things you want to keep and some things you want to change. Which ones are they? What do you know for sure? What do you not sure of? What are your questions? There's always conflict and contradictions. Can you define them? Can you see them? What contradictions do you see? What surprises you? What did you not expect? And finally, what's the one thing you can do to make a difference? I have a hand raised from Prof. Rami. Yes, Prof. Rami, you can speak or you can write in the chat space.
No, I'd like to speak actually, and expect that. But don't you think that during the realm of uncertainty, you will have situation and minutes where you have to be very firm, because sometimes if you just follow the principle of uncertainty and you are going to make things lax, you might lose at a certain point. I will give you an example. For example, how to manage an institution during the COVID-19 period. At the start, we almost knew nothing about that. There were points where you have to be very, very definitive in your measures. You have to do 1, 2, and 3, 4 as an institution. And then there are other areas where we can have discussions and see what we are expecting in the future, how to try to resolve the problems we are identifying now. But I think even in the during uncertainty, the best model is a hybrid between being finite and infinite. Thank you.
I agree with you completely that the best model is a hybrid. And what I'm telling you is you need to be able to tell the difference and not confuse certainty and uncertainty. If you are in uncertainty and you think it's certainty and you treat uncertainty as if it were certain, you will make a mistake. You will make many mistakes. You will waste your resources, time, and energy and people. So yes, it is a hybrid model. You're absolutely correct. And you have many certain finite situations embedded into uncertainty. So you have both, and they are one inside the other, but you cannot have, let me say, you can have certainty inside of an uncertain situation, but you cannot have uncertainty inside a certain situation. So in certainty, everything is clear and you act upon it. In uncertainty, you may have some things that are clear and some things that are not. There's a hand raised. Yes. Someone wanted to ask a question to speak. Please raise your hands and ask questions all the way at any time. Was there a question, a hand raised? I saw a hand go up and then disappear. Okay.
Rami,
Yes.
Yes,
you
that
have
was
your hand raised, Rami.
the question. Thank you.
Okay. So we keep going. So the important thing is to know the difference between certainty and uncertainty and not try to reduce uncertainty into certainty. Not reductionism works in finite situations. When you have clear boundaries, you can break it down into pieces and solve them. When you have unclear boundaries, breaking things down doesn't work. This is a take-home message number one for this group. What I would like to do now is to go into breakout rooms. And what I want to do, I'm going to put in the chat space. Let me see if I can put this for everyone. I'm going into the chat space and I'm going to put a slide here in the chat space. A PowerPoint slide. What you're looking at now will be available to you in the chat space. I want to use breakout rooms if I can. You see. To go into breakout rooms, and I want to see how many participants we have. We have 40 participants. So I'm going to put 4 people in 10 breakout rooms. And what I would like you to do in the breakout rooms is to discuss very briefly what certainty means for you, what certainty looks like for you, and what uncertainty looks like for you in your work. What's the difference between certainty and uncertainty for you in education and in healthcare practice? And what can you know even in uncertainty? And how do you decide to take action when you're not sure and uncertain? I would like each of you to comment on this and in the next 15 minutes in the chats in breakout rooms. Are you ready? Are you ready to go into breakout rooms? So
Yes.
Here we go. So you should join the breakout room, click join, and you will be in the breakout room. You have 30 minutes, you have 15 minutes.
Dr. Manal, did you receive any broadcast message asking you to join?
Say it again.
I think some of the doctors still did not join. So did you receive a broadcast message or anything asking you to join?
No, I did not.
I think Dr. Manal, who else?
I'm going to move them into rooms myself.
Yeah, someone is asking for help.
Yes. I'm working on it. Some people are not joining, and there's nothing I can do. I put them in rooms, but they don't join.
Yes, Prof. Menen, in Breakout Room 8, they're asking for the slides.
Wait.
Should I share it again?
I moved to room 9. That should be better.
Yeah.
There are 2 people in room 8. There's one
Yes.
person in room 8. I moved to room 9, room 10. Okay.
Okay, thank you so much, Prof.
Yes.
I think Dr. Manal has a technical issue because she's still not joining, and Prof. Fazaldar.
I'm sorry, say again.
Some of them, I think they're having technical issues. They're not joining the room.
I know.
Yeah.
There's no. I cannot make.
I'll try to call them because they're at AGU.
Yeah, Dr. Manal has not joined. I can try to put him in. I have him in room. Put him in room 7. Can join, but he's not opening, so nothing I can do. Almost everyone else is engaged. 2 people
Yes.
are not, so we are okay. So there is a waiting room that people can go into.
Dr. Manal, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
I think Dr. Manal is now here with us in the main room. She's back.
I've
Yeah.
tried to put Dr. Manal into a group several times, but it's not working.
And Prof. Fazal also. Yeah.
Yeah, Fazal.
Yeah, Fazaldar, yeah.
Not joined as well. So, you know, sometimes there are people.
Maybe they're not on the screen.
Sometimes there are people who decide not to join a room. And Dr. Reem has not joined. So with the people, for the people who have decided not to join, there is not much.
Okay, يلا بنحطهم في الchat إن شاء الله again now. Okay. Yes. Prof, they're asking for the slides again.
Slides are in the chat space.
Why can't they find them?
In the chat space. I put the instructions for the breakout room are in the chat space. I cannot show all the slides. It's too big for the chat space.
Yeah. So
they want to see all the slides?
They're saying that they can't see them. This was Dr. Salman. Let me check in which breakout room he is.
If in the breakout room, they click in the chat space, they can open up the slide for the instructions for the chat space, but they cannot open up the slides for the presentation in general. I put the slide that has the instructions, the task for the breakout room into the chat space so that everyone can open it inside the breakout room.
Prof, in breakout room 7, there is only one participant. Can we move her to another breakout room?
Group 7, yes, just
yes.
a moment. Group 3. I move them to group 3.
Okay.
Anything else that
we have Prof Afif and Prof Odeh also just joined us.
Hello.
Yes.
Hi, Prof.
Hello.
Yes.
Yes, in room 7, there is only one participant, Prof.
I'm trying to move this person, but they're not responding. I see that there's no join in the right-hand side of the group.
Yeah. I think that participants from Oman are facing technical issues. The connection there is not good. We always face that. I don't know why Zoom in Oman is not working very well.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you suggest?
We're trying our best, but sometimes technology fails us.
So this is uncertainty, yeah?
Yeah.
It's a good example.
Yes.
And I
Welcome,
think
Prof. Afif.
Yeah, I think most of the time we live in uncertainty. Even when we put people in rooms, we have to move them from one room to the next.
Nothing is certain.
So what I'm talking about is real. It's not hypothetical.
Yes, true.
We live in uncertainty. We make all our decisions most of the time in uncertainty. I'm not and even though I am sure that the people are in the rooms, I am not sure what they're doing.
We can invigilate if you want.
I don't want to interfere.
No. Welcome, Prof. Odeh. He's also a speaker with
الله
us.
يسلمك. اهلين ساره. انا بستمع عندي بس حتى اشوف الجو ساره.
احنا عندنا now breakout rooms.
It's okay.
They're having a discussion.
I'll wait till my lecture comes, but just to have a feeling of the session. So thank you.
Sure, most welcome.
So we have about 4 minutes more, and then we'll come back. You are not participating in the breakout rooms?
Well, I'm prepared. I'm here. I am a student. You tell me what to do.
Okay.
I can switch roles. I have no problem.
What
I
is
can
your name?
listen. My name is Afif Ben Salah. I'm the Vice Dean for Graduate Studies and Research and Professor of Community and Family Medicine in the College of Medicine and Medical Sciences.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. And how about you, Stewart?
I'm professor, well, formally my title is Professor of Cell Biology and Physiology, but I'm actually a professor of anatomy. My department name changed, so I became professor of the department, but not, I am an anatomy professor. But I stopped teaching anatomy in many years ago, and I became a medical educator very early on. I think I switched to medical education in 1981.
Oh.
And so I studied, I was in research. I did basic science research for 12 years. And then I changed my career from basic research to medical education. So
Where, in which?
At the University of New Mexico, University of New Mexico, in New Mexico, United States.
Okay, pleasure to meet you.
I was professor of anatomy, and then I was dean for medical education, and also director of research in medical education. So I was director of faculty development and research.
Okay. Congratulations. Congratulations. That's really very important.
Yeah, and also I was in faculty development. I was responsible for problem-based learning at the School of Medicine. Actually, I was responsible for all the teaching at the School of Medicine, including the hospital. So I worked for many years in the clinic, in the community, and in the classroom with all the departments. We had 22 departments at my medical school. I worked in all of them.
So you are an asset in medical education, I think. You have such a very strong experience in both theoretical aspects as well as clerkships and clinical training.
Most of my experience is in medical education. I have worked in 27 countries as a consultant.
Oh, such a wide range of experience.
Welcome, Dr. Rima, now just joined us also.
Yes, more than 100 schools.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm going to give for a 1-minute warning. So they have a 1-minute warning before we come out of the rooms.
Transfer the money and I can transfer it as a wire transfer, you mean? Normal transfer? Bank transfer?
I didn't understand.
Okay. Okay.
Rima, please mute.
Okay.
She doesn't hear us.
Yeah.
This is Money Talks.
Again, uncertainty.
At last, I heard somebody talking about something interesting, money. Okay.
Not interesting. It's good to see some faces.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So we should all be back. People are coming back now. In 1 minute, we will all be back. Okay, we are all back. So it's good to see your faces, everyone.
Yeah.
What was my question for you now? Just briefly, what was important to you in this breakouts discussion? What did you learn from this discussion?
Change of experience between different institutes. I was in a breakout room with a colleague from a different institution.
What was different?
We discussed the experience of examination during the COVID-19 pandemic, what they did and what we did here.
What did you learn?
I learned different experience. As I said, I learned a complete different experience. They, for example, postponed the exam. We couldn't postpone our exam. So at least different experience. And then again, he was telling me about the examination of the Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons of Pakistan. And they have external examiners from the UK. And in urology, I'm a gynecologist. We never use simulated patients for gynecology because it's intimate. I learned something very surprising, that also in urology, you don't use simulated patients because it's a very intimate specialty.
So you were surprised?
Well, I didn't know this, yeah.
Yeah. And do you see that people are working in uncertainty most of the time?
Yes, of course. I mean, uncertain education, you mean, or in
especially in education. You know, education is supposed to be uncertain. You learn one thing and you move on to the next. You're always learning. How about someone else? What did you? What was
I learned how to make uncertain situation more certain.
How did you do that?
For example, this was the example we discussed. Examinations during the pandemic, COVID pandemic.
Yes.
And we try to make compromises. We try to adapt certain things which we normally in certain situations we do not. So we go into an adaptive mood in uncertain situation to make some things certain, more certain.
Yeah, I think more certain is more accurate. They're not certain, but
they are not perfect. Yes.
Yeah, what you're doing is being adaptive, and then you see what happens and you adapt again. Then you see what happens and you adapt again. It's a continuous adaptive role. Leadership is continuously adaptive. It doesn't stop. So the object is to keep the game going, not to win. You really
on top of things.
You cannot win this game. So this is the message, the first message that I want to bring in the first hour, that uncertainty is normal and that you should not try to make it finite and certain. You can be adaptive as Prof has said, but you cannot be certain. There are two hands up. Muna, yes, Muna.
Yes, thank you very much for the interesting workshop. One of the issues that we discussed in our group is with uncertainty, always we will be anticipating, looking for the risk, and having more than one plan to resolve the risks and the unwanted outcome of the whatever we are doing, and we know that there is uncertainty out of it. And evaluating, monitoring, and once be alerted to the risk that it is the unexpected or unwanted outcome is going to happen, then possibly going to the second plan, plan B or plan C, to reduce the bad outcome or unwanted outcome.
Yes, you are correct. You are correct.
We took COVID as an example of the different plans that each medical institution came up with to, for example, the compromise of the exams, covering the unexpected outcome did take place even at the internship level. We know that we have examined students and possibly there was some skills that were not evaluated. So this was transferred at the level of internship, managing that the interns, when they are at the hospital, we need to make sure that these areas are also covered so that we will not come up with an outcome which is not expected, which is a physician or a doctor who could not perform some of the skills that he is expected to perform at a residency.
Yes, you are correct. You are correct that there's always unexpected and risk. And the minute you make a decision, you move, even if you move to plan B, then you have to adapt again. And you move to plan C, you have to adapt again. So the message I'm giving you is that the leadership in education or in practice or in organizations is an adaptive process. It's not one of making a clear decision and then being finished. So it's the first message. I think Prof. Rami has his hand up, and then I want to continue to the next. Yes, Prof. Rami.
You. We had a discussion here from AG with respectable colleagues from Oman as well. First of all, they emphasized the importance of having an adaptive mode, and then we discovered that we have different opinions about what is certain and what is uncertain. Is uncertainty related to time, or is it related to an event? This point has been raised, and we touched upon. We tried to make an example of certainty and uncertainty. Certainty, for example, was that you have to graduate your final year students, for example, but because of the COVID situation now, too many questions have been raised. Shall we graduate or postpone, and how to do this? And we discovered that we all meant the same thing, although we might have used different terms. But at the end, we discovered that we have common things in our mind, but maybe because we did not define exactly, my concept was it's uncertain was different from colleagues. So apparently it seems that we are having totally different approaches. But when we discussed things together, we found that actually, if we use the proper nomenclature, then maybe we have the same ideas at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think shared exploration is what you are talking about. That when you explore together, you find a shared concept and you work together. This is exactly what I want to talk about next. Lena, do you have a quick question that I want to go forward next? Yes, Lena. You're on mute, Lena. You have to unmute.
Okay. Actually, I don't have a question, but I have something to share that it is something we learned throughout the discussion with the colleagues in the meeting room just now. I believe the uncertainty is a healthy feeling once you are having the flexibility. If you are a flexible person, you can have a very good adaptive system with any changes happening throughout the leadership experience. Yes.
Well, yes, I agree with you. Flexibility is essential. Let me share my screen with you and raise a question for us. What can you do to make informed decisions when you are uncertain? Is there a methodology to be adaptive? Most of you are adaptive because you just do it. If you are talking about training and developing leaders or learning leadership, then is there a way to do this? And I want to say that to be adaptive, to be flexible, we call this adaptive action leadership. Adaptive action leadership. That adaptive action leadership is an iterative inquiry process leading to informed and wise action. You want informed, wise action, even when you don't have all the information you need and you must make a decision. You want to have an informed decision. And an informed decision is a wise action because there's no other option. So iterative means that it's again and again. As soon as you make a decision, plan A, plan B, plan C, that the next option comes up. And adaptive action leadership is very useful in complex, uncertain situations. And it uses 3 simple questions to help people learn to take action, to bridge the gap between where you are now and where you want to be. And those 3 questions are what, so what, and now what. I want you to learn these 3 questions as part of your leadership repertoire. You may already ask one of them, but not all of them. I think particularly most people do not ask, so what? They go from what immediately to now what. And it's very important that these 3 questions work in an iterative manner. These 3 questions seem really simple, so many people don't take them seriously, but they are based on mathematical, complex, adaptive principles. There's very deep theory behind these 3 questions. And I'm just putting them very simply forward, that when you ask what is going on, what do you see? You have a situation, you must observe. What do you observe? You teach your students to observe in the clinic. You teach them to observe in the laboratory, in the community. What do you observe? Just be able to say what you see. What are the patterns? What does it look like over time? Patterns evolve over time. And every situation has some tension in it. And I don't mean psychological anxiety so much as what I mean is there's difference. One prof was describing the difference between two schools' assessment system in the pandemic. So the difference is tension. Difference is tension. There's energy in difference. Difference leads you to think about something else. Difference moves the situation forward. So it's very important to look for difference. What keeps you up at night? This is the what. I used to wake up at night all the time when I was working in New Mexico. What do you know now? What do you wonder about? So what? You need to be able to answer these questions in the situation you're involved in. You need to be able to say, what questions do you have that never seem to get answered? What? So this what is the first question in this process? The second question, and then there's what patterns do you want to shift and what do you want to keep? The second question is, so what? This is the most important question in my view because most people don't do it. This is the most important question because it makes meaning. So what patterns, what do the patterns mean for you? What does it mean what you are seeing? What is the significance for you? What is the significance for your colleagues? What is the significance for your department? What is the significance for your institution, for your community? Most people just make a meaning at one level. You need to make meanings at multiple levels. So what is actually possible? What are the possible actions? What does the literature say? What does the research say? What have other people done? So what can you learn from the literature? So what have you tried before in the past? And so what are your options now in the future? What is accessible to you? What can you reach now? These questions are probably some of the most important questions you can ask yourself. Leadership asks these questions. So what is possible? So what patterns do I see? So what have I tried? What is accessible? What can I actually do now? And then based on what and so what, you take an action so that so what makes meaning and informs action. What is going on? What do you observe? What does it mean? And the meaning leads to action. The meaning leads to now what action will you take? What will you do now? Now what will you say? Now what will you measure? Now what is accessible to you? So that these three questions, what, so what, now what, are essential in leadership. Using these three questions will help you in your leadership decisions in both certainty and uncertainty. They're much in uncertainty. This is what you do. This is what you do to deal with uncertainty. And you do it over and over again. So you start with what, so what, now what, and then you take an action and it leads to a new situation. Something changes, and then you look at so what, and then now what. And something changes and you keep going. It's an iterative process that keeps going forward. So adaptive action is how, excuse me, adaptive action is how you deal with uncertainty. It seems very simple, but when you try it, it's very deep, it's very profound. And so this is the strategy, this is the method, this is the tool for working with uncertainty, to ask, what do I observe? What does it mean? Now what action will I take? I want to pause for a moment and ask what questions you have about this. And then after that, I think we should take a short break. So what questions do you have about adaptive action? Do you see it as something applicable to you? that you take adaptive action in uncertainty. What, so what, now what? This is what you actually do as a leader. The subject and the substance will be context specific, but the process will work in all contexts. So,
can I just ask a question on this?
yes, please.
Because you know, seeing it written down is different than, well, you know, I think we do this subconsciously, that we actually ask what, you know, like what's happening with the COVID pandemic, what are we going to do about the teaching if we have to go online, and then, you know, so how are we going to switch to online teaching, and then what are we going to tell the staff about doing the online teaching? I think isn't it a natural thing, or do we have to really focus on thinking of every step consciously?
No, it's not natural in the sense what you just did. Listen to yourself, Maha. You just said, what are we going to do? So what about the pandemic? What are we going to switch to teaching? Are we going to do this? You went from what to now what? You didn't
so what?
You did not ask so what. You skipped so what. So it's not what you do normally. I want you all to pay attention very carefully to this. What Maha just did is what most of you do. You go from what immediately to a solution. You don't stop and ask, so what does this mean for me? So what does this mean for my students? So what does this mean for my school? You do not look across multiple levels of so what. When you stop and ask, so what does this mean? It changes your decisions about what to do. When you just look at what and jump quickly to now what, to an action, you do not explore the possibilities that are open to you. And you make a decision very quickly, and most often you have to go back and do it again. So what I'm telling you, what I'm teaching you is to pause after you do what? The pandemic, yes, the pandemic, this, that, yes, the pandemic affects assessment, yes, the pandemic affects teaching, yes, the pandemic, this and that. So what does that mean for your teaching? You don't have to make a decision right away, but you can ask, what does that mean for your teaching? So it means that we have to change the way we teach. It means that we have to trust the students to do more things by themselves. It means that some teachers can work well online and some teachers cannot. It means many things. And when you consider the meaning, then it changes your decision for action. You must, in uncertainty, you must do adaptive action. You have no choice. When there are no answers, when there are no clear answers, there are only questions. In uncertainty, the better the questions you ask, the better your leadership. So I want to make this very strong, very clear. And I think we should take a break. I think we should take 10 minutes break and go for what we call a biology break. Use the bathroom, go for more coffee or tea. Make the phone call you think you should be making, but you should be back here in 10 minutes. It is now 25 after the hour for you. 6 and 8 is 4, 25 after 2 for you, I think. It's 8 o'clock in the morning for me. So now you should be back here in 10 minutes. I will begin in 10 minutes with all of you back here. That is, I don't know if I'm uncertain or certain about it. I think I have uncertainty that you will all be back. I am certain that some of you will be back, but I'm sure that not all of you will be back on time. Let's see what happens, okay?
Firm and uncertain.
Okay.
You will be able to adapt, I'm sure.
Yes. As will you. So I will put, you can put yourself on mute for 10 minutes, and I will set my timer for 10 minutes. And we'll be back. I will stay in the chat room. For those of you who wish to discuss this further, who wish to have an informal discussion on anything in particular, I will be here now for you. So if you wish to chat, I am available now.
Kifak Marwan?
Alan, how are you, Khalid?
It's been a while.
Sorry, Stewart, sorry, you can go to, you know, or just ignore us.
Well, I will ignore you. I'm very good at ignoring you.
Yeah.
Good to see you, Marwan.
Oh, who's
Hi,
that?
Marwan.
Oh, Ricky.
Randa.
Randa. Oh,
Hi,
Randa.
Marwan.
Salman Zayani. عبد الحليم.
مرحبا دكتور منورتنا اليوم سعداء برؤيتك.
It's unbelievable. I saw students who just I saw from Sultan Qaboos University. There is Muna Saadoun and there is Ma Tadouri, and what is the Satir? May Satir was there, right? Yeah. And Salma. Dr. Thuraya, how are you?
I think
How are you doing, Marwan?
Alhamdulillah, good. How are you?
Long time no see. Inshallah, everybody's doing well.
Inshallah. Yeah.
Just to introduce myself to the group, I came in late. I apologize. I was in clinic. I'm Thuraya Araisi. I'm the Vice Dean for Medical and Curricular Affairs at Wal Cornell in Qatar. زميلته لمروان. Literally, I'm now across the street from his office.
مرحبا دكتورة ثريا.
Hello, Khalid. كيفك?
I'm glad to just
كيف دكتور مروان؟
Muna, I was talking about you. How are you?
الحمد لله. أنا تعرف والله أول ما عرفتك.
I know because of the gray hair. I know what my wife is telling me, you know, to diet, and I keep telling her it's not good for you. If I diet, you know, I get more admirers, you know. So let's keep it this way.
That's risk management. She will have to have risk management.
كيفك مروان؟
It's nice to see you.
Alan, who's that? I can see everyone here.
Hi, Marwan.
معك سليمة مروان. Oh, I muted myself.
You are muted. Marwan, you are muted. Somebody muted us, so you have to unmute yourself.
Somebody is not happy with me, it seems. Talking too much. No, Sulaima, it's good to see you, my colleague.
Yeah, nice to see your gray hair. كيف الحال؟
الحمد لله الحمد لله.
الحمد لله.
Dr. Khalid Abu Marwan.
Hello. So how are things, you know, at your college? Things going? Do you have a new building yet, or are you still in the same?
No. That's the only thing. I think this is the only thing we are missing and trying, you know. Every college, they have a nice building except medicine and dentistry. Now it's we opened the third year. And these two colleges in every university, we keep saying, you know, they are the crown, sort of the jewel on the crown, you know, every university, and they should have the best buildings.
Yeah.
But there is a plan. There is a design is ready, and a hospital as well. And it was decided to start, you know, before COVID, and because of budget, they froze everything. We hope soon they will start the project, but it will take 4 or 5 years, you know.
Yes, I know, because when we visited, you know, there was already talk that they are going to be constructing the. Do you still have the same dean?
Well, it's he left, and it's me now. I am the acting dean.
Oh, okay, okay. And is
He
Salah
left,
still with you?
No, Salah left a year and a half now. He went back for family reasons. He went back to Egypt. He's in Egypt.
Okay.
So I am the old guard now. I am the old guard.
Just I'll take this chance to welcome Dr. Tasneem Atatra. I saw her joining us. She's WHO office representative here in Bahrain.
I saw the name. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw her.
Where is she now? She's still with us?
أهلا وسهلا. Nice meeting all of you.
تسنيم مرحبا.
Professor Abdul Halim.
يا مرحبا بفيك.
Tasneem is from the same college where I graduated. She was a few years younger than me.
Oh, okay.
She's from Al-Quds University. She's a graduate from the same medical school.
You shouldn't say a few words. It's many years younger than you. Okay.
Many years. Okay. أهلا تسنيم. فرصة سعيدة.
So colleagues, it's really a pleasure to meet you all. يعني أو أنا بعتذر إنه ما تمكنت إني أنا أكون معاكم خلال كامل الاجتماع. بحب بس أعرف عن نفسي للإخوان والأخوات. أنا دكتورة تسنيم عطاطرة، ممثلة منظمة الصحة العالمية ومديرة مكتب منظمة الصحة العالمية في البحرين. أنا أول ممثل للمنظمة في البحرين واستلمت مهامي في شهر 6 من هذا العام. أنا بيزت في المنامة في البحرين. جدا بتشرف في التعاون مع المؤسسات الأكاديمية المختلفة. شكرا جزيل الشكر للجميع وخصوصا بروفيسور عبد الحليم والطاقم وجامعة الخليج العربي اللي عملوا هذا البلاتفورم اللي جمعنا كلنا سوا، خصوصا إنه العمل على البحث العلمي أو بناء القدرات هي مسؤولية الجميع. فشكرا لكم وشكرا على استضافتي معكم اليوم.
شكرا دكتورة تسنيم، نتشرف بوجودك معنا وإن شاء الله يكون لنا لقاء يعني إن شاء الله قريب إن شاء الله رب العالمين.
It's good to see you. دكتورة.
شكرا دكتورة رندا، وسامحيني إني أنا لسه مقصرة في لقائك شخصيا.
لا ما عليه، إن شاء الله بنرتب.
إن شاء الله. الله يحماكم، يعطيكم ألف عافية. شكرا.
الله يعافيك إن شاء الله.
مرحبا دكتورة تسنيم. We met before, at least by phone. We discussed.
Yes, of course, Professor
It was a
Afif.
pleasure. Yeah.
It's all the time pleasure إن نكون معك، وإن شاء الله إلنا لقاء قريب بإذن الله.
إن شاء الله.
نفتخر بعلاقتنا القوية والمتينة كشركاء سويا نحو صحة للجميع وبالجميع. شكرا بروفيسور عفيف.
شكرا، يعطيك العافية.
دكتور ضياء ازيك؟
دكتور مروان، انا ما عرفتكش، انت صغرت على فكره، ما كبرتش. انت صغرت كتير وفعلا you are right, your wife should be very اخبارك ايه؟ وحشنا جدا. وحشنا كتير.
الله يسلمك، والله انبسطت اني شفتكم والله.
انا اكتر والله، انا اكتر.
دكتور عفيف. دكتور عفيف.
يس دكتور، يس.
بدي اقول لك مبروك على امبارح.
بارك فيك. So Dr. Stewart is facing some of the uncertainty. Everyone is talking in a...
It's okay.
This is part of the uncertainty, Dr. Stewart.
Oh, I live in the world of uncertainty. It's not new for me.
So what, Dr. Stewart? So what?
So what does it mean for me? It means that you are enjoying your company, and this is I am sharing the pleasure of your company.
Thank you. Likewise.
Thank you. If you don't mind, I need to go in 15 minutes. I have an important commitment, so I will leave in 15 minutes, if you don't mind.
We will miss you.
Thank you.
Your screen will be empty. Okay, so our time is up. 10 minutes are up. I wish to come back again. Thank you all for your patience and for your kind attention. I appreciate very much. So what I would like to do now is to explore more deeply the leadership issues that you are facing. because you are facing issues, and the better you understand them, the more your leadership decisions will be functional, will be effective. Effective leadership sees questions as patterns. What we see are patterns. What we are working with are patterns. We don't see things that are standing still. We see things that are moving in time. And so it's very important that we see patterns. Some of the patterns that I have seen are dysfunctional groups and committees, teams, crews. Here are some typical patterns from health professions education: lack of respect for norms, students and leaders, and revising curriculum, assessment and teaching is difficult. These are all uncertain issues. Too much work, not enough time. There's bias, there's gender bias, age bias, seniority, hierarchy, disciplines. There's bias about the unclear boundaries of my job and my task. Lack of coherence in the hierarchy, the staff, the administration. Not enough resources, not the infrastructure. We need new buildings for medicine and dentistry, as was being discussed during the break, and more. So that what you see as your challenges, what you see as your challenges are actually complex tasks that don't end. None of these are games that end. These keep going. These are leadership questions that keep going. And that other examples would be collaborative planning and implementation of curriculum. During the pandemic, collaborative planning for the pandemic. You feel that you have multiple roles. You're a teacher, you're a clinician, you're a researcher, you're an administrator. How to manage all these different roles. How to develop excellence in volunteer and institutional faculty. So one of my questions is, what are the issues that you are facing? And how do we think about these issues? These are wicked issues. This is an example of a sticky issue, an issue that's not easily solved. It won't stay solved every time you have a solution. It's too big to think of all at once. It has too many pieces to manage. It's unpredictable. This has no single cause. You cannot find a single cause. And it's open to external influences that you cannot control. And what you tried in the past is not working now. And so these are characteristics of many of the leadership problems that you are facing. And so I want to go into breakout rooms one more time. And what I would like you to do is to identify 3 leadership issues that you are facing now in which you do not have a solution. One could be the pandemic, how to do assessment in the pandemic. One could be about graduation, when to graduate students, whatever it is. Identify 3 leadership issues, each person. Write them down on a piece of paper, 3 leadership issues. Then choose the most important one. It's good to do 3 rather than 1 because you can see the perspective that you are dealing with. If you choose 3 issues and then choose 1, and then in the group, go around and each person speak. Read your issue out loud to the group. You don't need to discuss it. Just read it out loud. It's the what. You don't need to talk about so what. You can talk about so what after everyone has read their issue out loud. You go around the group, each person says, my wicked issue is da 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 da. Then the next person says, my sticky issue is A, B, C, D. Okay, and you go around, and then you can talk about them. Then you can ask questions. So we need one person to take notes. And after everyone has read their issue out loud, discuss what is similar among all of the issues together. I want you to identify what are the similarities among all of the different wicked issues. The note taker writes down what the similarities are and then reports back to the group. So I'm going to put you in groups of 4 or 5 into breakout rooms now. Are there any questions about the task? I will post this task in the chat space. Let me put it in the chat space now. So think about, direct message, everyone. Let me post this in the chat space so everyone can open it up. You can see them. So I'm going to put you into breakout rooms now, if you will go. And how many participants are we? We are 34. So we will go into groups of 4. We go into the same breakout rooms that we were in before. So if you would join your breakout room as before, and then if needs be, I will move you to another room. If there are not enough people, I will move you to a room. If you are one person, I will move 6. I moved 6. Hello. I don't know your name because you just says WHOCC.
Yes, my name is Sarah. I work here in the center, the WHO center here.
Can you change?
I'm Sarah.
You put your name in the instead of WHOCC, so I can see your name.
Okay, sure.
Much better. Thank you, Sarah.
Most welcome, Prof.
How long have you worked?
2 years now here at AGU.
Did you work on another place before?
I used to work here at the council, but this is like diplomatic area, totally different. I'm a translator. I'm interpreter.
Oh, excellent.
So yeah, now it's totally different thing I'm doing.
Really, very different.
Yeah.
Do you get to use your translation skills at all?
Yes, of course. It benefits me a lot here. And working at a WHO center, it's also like extra credit. Yeah.
That's great.
We hope one day I become translator at the UN. Who knows?
That would be great, wouldn't it?
Yes, sure.
You want to live in New York?
Well, actually, I'm American from a Jordanian descent, so yeah, my passport is American. I was born there. I was born in the States. My father was studying there, yeah.
What city?
So it would be easy for me to move there. Yeah, my family is there already.
Where were you born?
In Ohio. My father, he was studying in Ohio State University. Yeah.
Wow. I was born in New York.
The big city.
Yeah, a big city.
No one can compete with that.
I grew up in New York and I lived in Los Angeles. In the United States, during the time I was a young man, people moved around a lot. They didn't stay in one place. There was a time when every time you went to a different school, you moved to a different city.
Yeah, things now are getting more complicated, I feel.
It's more complicated now. They don't move around so much.
Yes.
Yeah, translation. So.
But here in Bahrain, I like it. I find it more convenient to stay in the Gulf area, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, Bahrain is a nice country. It's a small country and the people here are nice. So yeah.
You have family
there? It is
there?
a good place. My father, he was actually here also at AGU, but now he moved back to Jordan. So I'm here alone, only with my daughter and husband.
I moved to Brazil with my wife. My second wife is Brazilian, so
yeah.
We were living in the United States, and I got an invitation from the Ministry of Health in Brazil to come to Brazil to work. So it was very convenient.
Yeah. Same thing happened with my father. He came here to Bahrain to stay like for only 1 or 2 years, but then he liked it here. So he stayed for 8 years. Bahrain is really a nice country. You're welcome to visit anytime, Prof.
Yeah, I would like to visit.
Most of us here in the workshop actually we're expats, but we really love Bahrain. There is a saying that it makes you forget your family. So yeah, when I go to Jordan, I just can't wait to come back here.
That's great. That's great.
Maybe Prof. Odeh and Dr. Saud, they can agree with me.
Well, I would love to. I have been to Egypt to teach, and I have been to Saudi Arabia to teach.
Bahrain is more open. I know now in Saudi it's changing the situation, but still Bahrain, they accept more this diversity. Everyone can live, preach, and do whatever he wants. It's really better here in Bahrain. It's really a nice.
I worked in Jeddah, which is for Saudi is the most open.
Yes.
I worked in Jeddah. I once was at a conference in Riyadh.
Yes.
And it was much more formal. In Jeddah, I found to be very relaxed and very open.
Yes.
At least in the medical university, it was with mixed classes and
It's
very-
changing more now, yeah.
Yeah.
The new era for Saudi. We're all happy about it.
I think everybody wants things to change, and but the speed of change is the question, not if it will
It's
change.
very fast.
Yeah.
In Saudi, it's very fast.
Yeah. And I think more things will change too. I think they will keep changing.
We hope for the good always.
Yes.
For the better, yeah.
Me too. I hope for the good, and I hope.
But you're welcome to Bahrain anytime.
Thank you. You're very kind. I appreciate that. I will come. I will come when the pandemic is over.
Yes.
This is very horrible. Before the pandemic, I traveled all over the world, a lot, and now I have been home for what, a year and a half, almost 2 years. And
But thank God in Bahrain the situation is really good. They could, yeah.
What do you say, inshallah?
We hope. Yeah, inshallah, it's for us. It means that no, in a. They always say that about us Arabs, that when they start saying inshallah, using inshallah, it means no in a kind way.
I know the customs.
Yeah.
I don't speak Arabic though, unfortunately. I'm not good with languages. I'm not a language person, so I would not be good. I live in Brazil, and for me, Portuguese is very difficult language. Very, very, very hard. The construction of the subject is very difficult. People change the subject without changing the nouns. The subject changes all the time. So it's very hard to understand what people are talking about.
Even the sounds maybe are different. That's why you find it difficult for you, right? The phonetics, yeah.
The phonetics it's a lot like French in the sense that it has a lot of nasal stuff.
Yeah.
But they will talk about something and then change the subject without changing the object, without changing the substantive. There's a lot of you understood in Portuguese. This, that you have to understand the context.
Yes.
In order to understand what people are talking about, because it's not a very specific language, not like English, which is very specific.
Yes, direct, yeah.
Very direct. Portuguese is completely indirect. I don't know about Arabic. Is Arabic?
Well, this says a lot also about like people, like their language can tell you a lot about their social life, right?
Yes, very much so.
In Arabic, we tend to describe a lot. Like you find a lot of adjectives and I don't know why. It's a very descriptive language, yeah.
Yeah. Portuguese is descriptive, but very indirect. It moves around, comes in from the side. You kind of have to figure out what people are talking about. They never tell you what they're talking about.
Yes, so if you're a foreigner, you would not understand what is the main, yeah.
Yeah, well, it's difficult for me, but it's one of the challenges of life.
Maybe it's same thing for us here, Arabic, yeah. Like when you say no, it sometimes does not mean no, it just means you're too shy to say yes from the first time.
Yes.
We have Dr. Maha with us. Welcome, Dr. Maha. She's the Vice Dean, actually. I think the
breakout rooms are finishing.
Yes.
I will give people 1 minute more. Do you pause the recording during the breakout rooms? Or you were recording the whole time?
No, actually, I forgot to post. But it's okay. Our discussion was beneficial as well.
You can edit.
Yes, of course. Yeah, they're coming back, no?
Yeah.
Salam, Dr. Manal.
أهلا ازيك
أهلا وسهلا.
Hello, Dr. Manal.
Hi, how are you?
Yes, they're coming back.
Welcome back.
Hi.
Hello, welcome back, everyone. Welcome. Welcome back.
Sees uncertainty. How many join?
You're filled with uncertainty now. So I'm very curious. I'm very curious to learn what was similar amongst your sticky issues. What were the similarities amongst the different issues? I'm not so curious about what the issues were, but what the similarities were. What did the note takers have to report? You can write in the chat space, yes. Assessment of clinical skills, profession, staff-related issues, training, clinical training in uncontrollable situations. Very common. So it looks like control was the common issue in group 5. Issues of control, predictability.
Okay.
How about
in group 2?
Yes.
The common sticky issue was how is the COVID-19 pandemic creating uncertainties regarding educational processes? So that's a common issue which both of the team members came out.
Yes, excellent. Thank you.
In my group, I don't know what's the number of the group, lack of cooperation was shared by the 3 persons in the group. And when we tried to say, so what, to analyze this, in a way, it has been related to why we are not understanding the priorities in our institution. I mean, if my group, which are working with me, they have some lack of cooperation, it's because they don't understand why I am interested in finishing this, for example, in 2 days. And the same thing happens to me sometimes when things come from upward. So that was the other issue. It has, which is quickly raised, is the impact of COVID. People became more intolerant, and we were concerned that this might extend beyond the COVID. I mean, we have learned good things how to deal with COVID, but we don't want also to inherit some bad things that, or some hours being away from our office. This was not a privilege. Some people might feel that they want to make use of this. So we have raised a lot of things, but I think if my colleagues want to correct me, this is what I could pick up: the lack of cooperation and the stress induced on us by the COVID situation, tolerance.
Yes, those are definitely wicked issues, definitely issues that don't go away, that need to be managed. Let's see, I mean, one group has delivery, high workload, quality performance, delivery of teaching to all students, definitely difficult issues. Group 1, resources, including human resources, difficult recruitment, not enough financial resources, clinical placements and clinical assessments, achievement of learning outcomes. So it looks like evaluations, issues of human resources and achievement, definitely sticky issues. Anyone else want to share what was common amongst your sticky issues, wicked issues in your group? Last chance. Okay, managing change. Definitely a difficult issue, and one we're going to talk about in just a few moments. Managing change, definitely. skill training, quality and accreditation, lack of standardization.
Okay.
Yes.
Our group came out with the short and long-term impact on quality of education and graduates, coping strategies, both students and faculty, impact on faculty turnover, accreditation delay, and delay in projects of the university, which have a direct bearing on the university.
Yeah. Would you say that those issues are uncertain or certain?
Well, some of them, most of them are uncertain, but some of them, they have variable amount of certainty embedded within uncertainty.
Yes, always will be the case.
Yeah.
Prof. Sekira, there is always certainty within uncertainty, but there's never uncertainty in certainty.
Yeah. Now, moving further, what now that the next one, the suggestions that were proposed were prepare multiple scenarios and prioritize them, monitor, adapt, and do, if necessary, mid-course correction, and learn from other medical schools' experience in the region and beyond.
Those are excellent now whats. We didn't ask for now whats. We just wanted to know what the similarities were.
Oh, okay.
And so the reason.
Sorry.
Yes. Yes, please.
We talked about perhaps as a sticky issue, I think, which is common to majority of medical schools, is how to teach and assess professionalism. It's always difficult to embed it or integrate it into a curriculum as a teaching, and more difficult is to assess it. The second point, which could be also, I find it, as in my position, most of the time could be sticky, is faculty appraisal.
These are all sticky issues, definitely sticky issues. And what is common is the uncertainty across them, and that how difficult it is. And so it's really important to do adaptive action, to ask so what and make meaning of these issues. It's one of the most important leadership skills. Leadership is a skill. You can improve your skills. You can get better skills. Using adaptive action will improve your leadership skills immediately. Adaptive action can be as fast as the speed of one thought. It can happen very fast. Can take days, can take months, can take years. So adaptive action happens across all time scales. So it's not limited to one time scale. So the pandemic certainly requires adaptive action. So let me share my screen.
May I have a question to you, please?
Yes, please.
Because you have said it twice that there is no any element of uncertainty in a certain issue. Maybe I think this it cannot be an absolute. I can give you examples where this is a certain issue, but there will be some uncertainty about it.
Yes, whenever human beings.
I mean, it cannot be just absolute as this. It needs some flexibility.
Well, yes, there is always flexibility. When you compare different issues, some issues have boundaries that are very fixed. Some issues have expertise that's very dominant and important. The characteristics I described earlier of certainty and uncertainty define categories. They're not absolutes. They define categories in which you will work. So you need to work in what is useful. If we look for absolutes, we will always be frustrated with absolutes. They don't really exist in the real world. The only absolute is change itself. That we can be sure of. So, thank you very much. Let me go further and let me share my. Hang on one second. Share my screen. Leadership words meant to be leadership. I'm having a second, having one moment, please. Your patience, please. The uncertainty of technology for me is very big. What should be certain for me is always uncertain, dealing with technology. So what I want you to, the reason I asked you to look for similarities across sticky wicked issues is because what you will find is that wicked issues, sticky issues are patterns. They occur over time. The pandemic is a pattern over time. It's not a single event. That assessment is a pattern over time. It's not a single event. That all of the events you describe, collaboration is a pattern that happens over time. That how to teach and assess professionalism is not a single instant. It's a pattern that happens over time. So patterns have characteristics. When you are looking at a complex, wicked issue, one of the ways you can dissect the issue, you can understand more deeply, so you can make better decisions, is to ask, what are the similarities across these issues? What are the differences? And how do these similarities and differences connect? And how do they have meaning across space and time? So for example, in a clinical encounter or in teaching in a clinical encounter, the relationship between a patient and a physician or between a teacher and a student is not specific. It's a relationship that goes back and forth and back and forth. It happens over time. It's a pattern. It's a pattern of how people interact. Working in a community site where here is a community health worker working with families, it's a pattern of behavior in a family when you're working with a family or working with a group. Anytime you're interacting with a group, you see a pattern of group behavior. When you're working, even looking at a pregnant woman looking at ultrasound, you're looking at a pattern of a fetus or pattern of a fetus developing over time. You really want to see the pattern of a heartbeat, the pattern of development, the patterns of what's going on. So what we are concerned with are patterns. This is something you may do naturally, but what I want you to do is to step back, to zoom out a little bit of where you normally work and see patterns. And patterns are similar. Definition of a pattern is similarities, differences, and connections that have meaning across time and space. Why is this important? Because leadership is about noticing patterns. Leadership is about noticing patterns. You may do this automatically. What I want you to do it is more consciously. So one way to notice patterns is to make generalizations. In general, I noticed. Then to ask, in general, I noticed, but there were exceptions. In general, I noticed except. And then to see contradictions. In general, I noticed, in general, except, and on one hand, so in general, I noticed that the pandemic has upset medical education. Let me go back. In general, I noticed that the pandemic has really disrupted medical education, except that some things are continuing. We're continuing in the clinic, we're continuing online, and there seems to be a contradiction. On one hand, we are still teaching. On the other hand, we've changed the way we are teaching. And I'm surprised that at the creativity of many institutions in dealing with the pandemic. I'm surprised at the kinds of things that people have done. And I'm kind of puzzled. I wonder what's going to happen when the pandemic is less prominent, when it's less involved. I'm curious as to what's going to happen. So there are lots of ways. This is a way to look at a pattern. In general, what do I notice? What are the exceptions? What are the contradictions? What surprises me? What puzzles me? What do I wonder about? When you can do this with a problem you are facing, it's a way to analyze your problem. This is a picture of a very famous histologist, cellular anatomist, Ramon Cajal. This is in 1905 in his laboratory. This is a 1905 laboratory. And Ramon Cajal is famous because he was the first one to describe the cellular nature of the central nervous system, the brain. Up until his work, people thought the brain was a syncytium, that it was just one big mass interconnected, that there were no separate cells. People didn't think the brain was cellular. They thought it was one mass. And Cajal, what he did, and you can see his shelves full of bottles. These are stains, these are chemical stains that he used to stain. The problem was that people could not stain nervous tissue, that when they made histology of nerve cells, they could not stain them to see the outlines of cells. So they thought it was one big mass, but he found through trial and error ways to stain nervous tissue. And he found that there were similarities amongst cells in the nervous system that made an identity of the central nervous system as cellular. So he found that similarities hold things together, give identity. When you describe something, I was talking with Sarah during the break. We were talking about Arabic as a language, comparing it to Portuguese and English. And she was telling me that Arabic is a very descriptive language, full of color and descriptions, that lots of adjectives and adverbs in Arabic. And what those adjectives and adverbs do is they describe a situation and they hold an idea together. Adjectives describe something and they hold things together, it holds ideas together. When you say, so what does it mean? You're talking about what is the difference that is important. So what difference promotes meaning? Difference is, information is difference. Meaning comes from difference. Similarities give categorical identity. Similarities, when you find them, make cohesion, identity. When you say this is a color, different colors describe the concept of color, but the color that makes a difference for me might be red. So difference is information, promotes movement, provides information and energy. And when you say, now what, this is adaptive action. What will we do? How do we move and connect things? Connecting things is an exchange between things. So what, and now what, adaptive action works with noticing patterns. What's similar? What's the difference that makes the difference? So what, and now what is the connection we will make? An adaptive action. So let's look at this picture for a minute. What do you observe? What do you notice? In general, I observe lots of people. This is a canal in India during the summer season. In general, I observe lots of people in the water. In general, on the other hand, I see lots of people on the shore, except some people are watching and not participating. And I'm puzzled why more people are not in the water. And I'm really curious about what's going on in this neighborhood. So it allows me to develop the pattern of my thinking rather than just to look at this picture and say, oh, it's this. What you do when you develop patterns is you step back and you see, I realize this is one moment in time, it's a photograph. And then the next moment, more people will be in and more people will be out of the water. It's a pattern that develops over time. So it's complex, and complex systems, patterns are a group of semi-autonomous agents who interact in interdependent ways to produce system-wide patterns. such that those patterns influence agents. So every person is a semi-autonomous agent. Everybody works in your school, in your department that you interact with. They have some freedom of choice and some limitations. They are semi-autonomous, and they interact in ways that produce patterns of activity, patterns of a department. So you have similarities. For example, in the Department of Pediatrics, everyone's a pediatrician. So the similarities make a department of pediatrics that hold people together in the Department of Pediatrics. Yet each pediatrician is different, may have a different specialty. One may be a general pediatrician, one may be an adolescent pediatrician, one may be a pediatric surgeon, one may be a pediatric endocrinologist. So the differences make a difference and provide energy for the department. And now what you decide as a department depends on the meaning you make. So I want to show a film. This is a 5-minute movie. So I want you to watch this movie. It's about wolves in a park in the United States. And it's about how the introduction of wolves into a national park where there were not wolves before makes change in the rivers. So I want you to, the question I have for you watching this film is, what are the patterns that you observe? So what does it mean? What do these patterns mean? And now what might be possible? So I'm going to click this and hope that this movie plays for you.
One of the most exciting scientific findings of the past half-century has been the discovery of widespread trophic cascades. A trophic cascade is an ecological process which starts at the top of the food chain and tumbles all the way down to the bottom. And the classic example is what happened in the Yellowstone National Park in the United States when wolves were reintroduced in 1995. Now, we all know that wolves kill various species of animals, but perhaps we're slightly less aware that they give life to many others. Before the wolves turned up, they'd been absent for 70 years. That the numbers of deer, because there was nothing to hunt them, had built up in the Yellowstone Park, and despite efforts by humans to control them, they'd managed to reduce much of the vegetation there to almost nothing. They'd just grazed it away. But as soon as the wolves arrived, even though they were few in number, they started to have the most remarkable effects. First, of course, they killed some of the deer, but that wasn't the major thing. Much more significantly, they radically changed the behavior of the deer. The deer started avoiding certain parts of the park, the places where they could be trapped most easily, particularly the valleys and the gorges. And immediately those places started to regenerate. In some areas, the height of the trees quintupled in just 6 years. Bare valley sides quickly became forests of aspen and willow and cottonwood. And as soon as that happened, the birds started moving in. The number of songbirds, of migratory birds, started to increase greatly. The number of beavers started to increase because beavers like to eat the trees. And beavers, like wolves, are ecosystem engineers. They create niches for other species. And the dams they built in the rivers provided habitats for otters and muskrats and ducks and fish and reptiles and amphibians. The wolves killed coyotes, and as a result of that, the number of rabbits and mice began to rise, which meant more hawks, more weasels, more foxes, more badgers. Ravens and bald eagles came down to feed on the carrion that the wolves had left. Bears fed on it too, and their population began to rise as well, partly also because there were more berries growing on the regenerating shrubs. And the bears reinforced the impact of the wolves by killing some of the calves of the deer. But here's where it gets really interesting. The the wolves changed the behavior of the rivers. They began to meander less. There was less erosion. The channels narrowed, more pools formed, more riffle sections, all of which were great for wildlife habitats. The rivers changed in response to the wolves. And the reason was that the regenerating forests stabilized the banks so that they collapsed less often, so that the rivers became more fixed in their course. Similarly, by driving the deer out of some places and the vegetation recovering on the valley sides, there was less soil erosion because the vegetation stabilized that as well. So the wolves, small in number, transformed not just the ecosystem of the Yellowstone National Park, this huge area of land, but also its physical geography.
Interesting, no? How does the introduction of a small,
very interesting.
We should bring wolves in the colleges, I see.
So my question is, who are the wolves in your school?
Yeah.
What did you learn? What's the message that you take home from this film? What's the message that for leadership, that you take home from this film?
We have to disturb the system continuously.
Yes. Exactly, Afif. Disturbing the system is one of the roles of leadership. That you don't change this, you notice that it took years for the system to change. So you don't expect, one of the biggest problems with leadership is that they get the time scale wrong for the changes they want to introduce. Most leaders think, oh, this is going to happen this year, or this is going to happen this month or next week. And you almost always get the time scale wrong. So one of the things about leadership is to have a flexible understanding of the time scale of change. You may want things to happen quickly, but the developments of huge changes took time in the park. So that disturbance, as Afif said, disturbing the situation is one of the primary roles of a leader. The leader has to know how and when to disturb things, and to disturb things in a small way, and then let things develop over time. What else did you observe?
How certain was that change which resulted from introducing them? How certain did they know about that?
They didn't.
They didn't.
We have to monitor. We have to monitor.
Yeah.
And to wait for the new equilibrium where it will be.
Yeah.
Is it really that what you like, or worse than what you like?
Yeah.
It might happen.
Maybe things would have gone the other way around, right?
They definitely would have gone the other way around. If one small change would make a huge difference. So the thing is this, the changes happen. Then you decide if you like them or not. But the changes happen first. And then you look at them and you say, what do I observe? What's the pattern? What does it mean for me? Does it fit with my goals? Does it fit with my task? What does it mean? This is why so what is so important. You observe what happens. So what does it mean? Does it fit with my goals, with my what I want to happen with what we're trying to do, the program, or not? But the change happens first, then you decide. So as Afif said, you have to do continuous evaluation. You have to look, decide, look, decide, look, decide. So an effective leader has his fingers or her fingers on the pulse and is taking the pulse all the time. So an effective leader knows what's going on. So Khalid, you cannot predict, but you can decide. Okay?
Right.
What else? Excellent, excellent question. Very good observation. Other comments? What did you
know, the other thing that you notice is that, you know, this one factor had effects on many different areas.
Yes.
I mean, it wasn't just the animals, it was the plants and the animals and the river and everything. So the disturbance, you have to, you know, you have to try and theorize ahead of time, try to figure out what could be the consequences and in what areas.
Yeah, you can try, but you cannot hold it tightly.
No, you cannot.
You cannot. You must hold it very loosely, so that it can fall. So a smart leader allows things to happen and then decides. So one of the things that's necessary that Khalid mentioned, but I want to emphasize, is that all the things in the park were connected. They were not disconnected.
True.
So if the park was a medical school, it would never have changed, because pediatrics doesn't talk to surgery, and surgery doesn't talk to family medicine, and family medicine doesn't talk to pathology. Okay, so what you have at your school is a park with fences around it that keeps people from interacting. In the park, the reason it developed and matured and became diverse and stable is that everything was interconnected. So the second take-home message is that the interconnections between things, you notice that the similarities defined, the deer was similar, the wolves were similar, the deer and the wolves were different. So the similarities and differences and the connections they make over time and space, that's the definition of pattern. Similarities, differences, and connections over time and space. That's what you are looking at when you have your sticky wicket issue. So as a leader, what you have to do is see similarities as a pattern, differences that move things, differences are energy that move things, and the connections that make things possible. So as Khalid said, as Afif said, when you disturb the situation, you set things in motion, you make the connections, but then you step back and you let things happen and you wait and see. So this is leadership in the pandemic. This is leadership in wicked issues. This is my message to you. My main message is what, so what, now what in the situation. Let me go further, because I'm looking at the time and I'm looking at what I want to do. Let's see where I am. So what I want to say now is, can you see this? Is this visible to you?
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to get it to be.
Yes, but it's not.
Yes, I'm trying to fix it. Hang on a second.
Responding to you.
No, it's not responding to my wishes. I'm filled with uncertainty today. It's just the way things are. Okay, so let me now go back. One moment. Navigating uncertainty live during a workshop is always challenging. So here we see the wolves, yes? Can you see?
Yes, we can see, yes.
Okay. So what are the wolves you want to introduce to your work? What's your timeline for expectations, and what's the ecology of your workplace? You are a leader. If you don't think about these things, you are in trouble. So I want to talk about change, because what we just saw in this movie was change, and change is a constant. Everything in the park was in motion. Everything in your leadership domain at your school is in motion. Nothing is fixed and static. The departments are moving, the students are moving. Learning should be moving. It should be changing all the time. You should be learning new things all the time. You see new patients, you have new plans, you have new programs, you have new buildings. Things are changing all the time. Change is about movement, and leadership has to do with adaptation to movement. This is the way you think about leadership. It's adaptation to movement, making meaning. For us, there is no movement without resistance. Now, how to think about resistance. I tell you how I think about resistance. Resistance is somebody else not doing what I want them to do. Resistance is something not happening the way I predicted it would happen. Resistance is something not happening the way I want it to happen. But it turns out that the problem is what I want, not what is happening. Remember, you can't push the donkey. You can't push people to go where you want. You cannot change people. You can change the circumstances in which they work, and they will adapt. But you cannot change people. It's a really important message, especially for young people. Older people learn this lesson over the years, but young people don't know this. They try to change people. You cannot change people. Persuasion is very limited. We know the world through differences, patterns, instabilities, and familiarities. You don't change other people. They change themselves. That's the secret to effective leadership. So change happens when a system can no longer sustain the accumulated tensions in it. So when I think Afif said that you introduce disturbances into the system, what you do is you increase or decrease the tension. If you want stability, you decrease the tension. If you want instability to move towards change, you increase the tension in the system and you manage the tension. Here's an example of mechanical change. Here's a ball, a black ball that is on an incline. If you put the ball, let me see if I can draw, annotate, draw, okay. If you put the ball here, it's going to roll back down and stay in this position. If you put the ball here, it'll roll back down. So you can predict these conditions. This condition allows you to predict. This is finite. This is certain. You will. This ball will always come to rest here. This is certain. This is more uncertain. On a level playing field, you can move the ball and it will stay here. You can move the ball and it will stay here. The ball will stay wherever you move it. When you disturb the system by changing the conditions of the system, you can, now you have unpredictability, you have uncertainty. You're not sure, will the ball go this way? Will the ball go that way? How fast will it go depends on the incline. So what a leader does is changes the conditions so that change happens. You don't push people. You don't push the ball. You change the conditions and let the ball go where it wants to go. This is a critical concept of leadership that I want to make clear for all of you. It's one of the main take-home messages that we're talking about. Let me see, I want the mouse. So instability has a function. Instability is the point of entry. That when you disturb a system, you make it possible to enter into possibilities. So when you establish national guidelines or outcomes-based medical education or accreditation for your school or licensing for specialties, what you're doing is disturbing the system by setting standards. You allow a clear distinction between one pattern and another. An example would be progress testing. And that information, that something is in the process of forming, is about difference. So performance assessment is about difference. Competence is about measurement. Competence is about measurement against a standard. Performance is about uncertainty in the moment. So one of the things about patterns, like the wolves, is that patterns are dynamical. They're not static. You'll see these waterfalls, the same amount of water, the same water molecules, are not, the same water is not in the same spot at the same time. That the pattern, what you're seeing here is not the same as what's here. What's here is not the same as someplace else. That the patterns of water are moving, and that you see the whole pattern of waterfall, but you can zoom in and see things at a detailed level. Just the same thing as these circular plates are spinning. You see spinning plates because they're moving, that if you stopped, the plate would fall, the pattern would change. So it's really important to understand that patterns are dynamical, that they keep changing. Even in the nervous system, across a neuron, the sodium-potassium gradient across a semi-permeable membrane is a gradient, and it's a difference, it's a gap. That when you disturb the gradient, sodium flows in and there's an action potential. When you disturb the curriculum, when you disturb a department, when you disturb a program funding or guidelines, you enable movement to happen and you see change. Now there's three kinds of change. There's three kinds of change: static, dynamic, and dynamical. Three kinds of change. Static change is dimensional, it's known and knowable, it's certainty, it's finite, it's certain. Static change is a pre and post study. It's what you measure before and after. It's a snapshot, it's a static measure. It's linear causality, it's cause and effect. It's procedures, it's recipes, it's a normal distribution statistically, and it's what you call best practice. It's defined, you follow it, you can predict it, it happens. This is static change. When I move the mouse over this screen, I get this picture. This is static change. You measure the height of your child 1 year, and then you measure the height of your child the next year, and then the next year, and the next year. And you see the difference between 2 points. This is static change. This is before and after measurements, pre and post studies. Second kind of change is dynamic change. Dynamic change is moving. Static change is fixed. Dynamic change is moving, but it's still linear. It's linear movement. So the dimensions are still known and knowable, but now you're measuring against a standard. So what you measure could be different at one moment and different at another moment. So you measure competencies against standards. You measure what students can do against standards. But the feature of dynamic change is that it happens in stages and phases. It's a linear progression. That when you measure a dynamic change, you're taking an average over time. So you're not addressing the needs of individuals, you're looking at group data. You have a slow response to perceived needs of change. You still have Gaussian distribution, and now you have best practices. You have multiple kinds of practices. There's more than one way to do a history and a physical examination. There's multiple practices, whereas there's one way to put a spinal needle in, or to put a central line in, or to take blood pressure. So static change, dynamic change, both are linear. These are both certain, okay? This is certainty, this is finite. Now we have uncertainty. Well, I'm sorry. Dynamic change is 7 steps to something, 7-step approaches. Dynamic change is modules in a curriculum in a linear sequence. Students move through time. This is dynamic change. Steps, sequences, procedures, dynamic change. Dynamical change is nonlinear, it's complex, it's unpredictable, it's an iterative, adaptive action cycle. These are your sticky, complex, wicked issues. The changes are sensitive and responsive to conditions, tensions, and pressures and disturbances. They're episodic. Sometimes there's a period of quiet, then there's a sudden, unpredictable change. Then there's a release of tension. New patterns emerge. These are wicked issues. And what you see is good enough. It's not exact. It's what fits the conditions. So an example of dynamical change would be sand falling in a pile. The sand falls, the pile increases, and then at a certain point, the sand falls down. There's an avalanche. Let me get to draw. There's an avalanche. The sand falls down, and then the pile starts again. The sand falls, and then there's another avalanche. The sand falls down. It accumulates tension. Tension builds, tension, 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 avalanche. So if you looked at the size of the avalanche compared to how frequent the avalanche occurs, you would see a straight line. And you see this distribution in nature. And almost all changes in nature follow this curve. It's called the inverse power law. And the take-home message for you as a leader, the most frequent changes are the smallest ones. The most frequent changes are the smallest ones. The wolves in the park were small change that led to big change. You didn't change the park all at once. You could not move the river. You could not move all the animals. You could not move the trees. What you do is you introduce small change as a leader and you let it develop over time. So what this shows is that the most frequent changes are small. So if you're going to be a smart leader, you make small changes frequently. Small changes frequently. You take the temperature of the situation frequently. This is the skill of adaptive leadership. So you have static, dynamic, and dynamical, this is the uncertain change. This is a certain change. The difference. So I have a question for you. Most of the changes you are involved with are static, dynamic, or dynamical. In the chat space, if you click on the question, you can answer this question, or you can go into the chat space and answer this question. Most of the, I'm opening my chat space. Most of the changes that you are involved with, are they static? Most, not, you have some of everything, but most of the changes you deal with, are they dynamic or are they dynamical? Afif says dynamical. How about the rest of you? Be quick. Most of the changes you are dealing with, are they static, dynamic, or dynamical? Into the chat space. Dynamic, which means they're finite and controllable. Dynamical, we have a mixture. Those of you that have dynamic changes for your leadership, you're lucky because you can control and predict them. Those of you that have dynamical changes have adaptive action to deal with. All three, depending on circumstances. Yes, Sebastian, you are correct. It depends is the correct answer. But I'll tell you, most of my issues are dynamical. I would like them to be dynamic and static. I have dynamic and I have static change. But on a daily basis, most of my stuff is dynamical. So.
You mean the ones that you have problems with?
Yes.
Not the ones that occur repeatedly.
Most of the.
I mean, you're in other words, you're disregarding the static and the dynamic as being non-sticky and only focusing on the sticky ones.
Well, as a leader, where do you need to put your attention?
Okay, that's another question. Yeah, obviously, for the things that are sticky.
Yeah, what keeps you up at night?
Yeah.
Okay, what are the ones that are most difficult for you? What are the ones that you don't know how to do now? This workshop is focused on the difficult issues, not on the easy ones. The easy ones you can do. I don't need to spend time telling you what to do about the easy ones. I'm not focused on the easy decisions. You don't need my help for the easy decisions. You need my help for the sticky ones, for the dynamic changes.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm talking about them. So let me see if I can move. So I want to do one more thing before we finish today. How to develop leadership capacity for your institution. How to develop leadership capacity for your institution. Should you have a department of medical education? Do you have a department of medical education? Or should you not have a department of medical education? What are your options? I will tell you what I have learned over the last 40 years, looking at medical schools, looking at more than 100 schools. When a school has a very strong culture of leadership, very top-down, very authoritarian, very strict, and there are departments and the leadership is very powerful and very present, that every decisions come from the top very strongly, then you can have a department of medical education because the department will have structure and function. And people will listen to the Department of Medical Education because there's a strong leadership in the school. When leadership is dispersed throughout the school, when there's not a very strong top-down leadership, when things are not well established, or there's a loose culture, a more innovative, a more creative culture, then you're better not having a medical education department. You're better having a dean of medical education and putting an education leader in each department. So it's better to have dispersed leadership in education when the leadership is dispersed. When the leadership is strong and centralized, then you can have a Department of Medical Education. To try to establish a Department of Medical Education in a dispersed culture will not work, will be frustrating, and will fail. This is based on experience at many schools. So just a word of caution. What are the advantages of having a Department of Medical Education or a unit of medical education? You have expertise concentrated in one place. You have a source that you can go to for help. You can have task forces and you can put those people to work. The disadvantage of having a Department of Medical Education is that the people in the other departments will say, well, I don't need to do medical education. They have a department, they will do that. I don't need to do anything. They have medical educators, they will do that. That's not my job, it's not my task. The people will. Does this sound familiar to you?
Yep.
So having a concentrated group of experts, other people will dismiss their responsibilities. So the challenge then is to diffuse responsibility into departments by not only having a Department of Medical Education, but having departmental educators inside each department. What I did in New Mexico was one of the other thing is if you have a Department of Medical Education and you want to have longevity, it has to have research base. That longevity based on faculty development, teaching development alone will not work. It will dissipate and begin to fail. That if you have people doing research and publishing in medical education, your department will stay alive and will have longevity. It's just what happens, what you see in reality. So faculty development, the teaching skills and other kinds of skills should be continuous, not episodic. It should be a continuous thing. I developed in New Mexico the Medical Education Scholars Program, a program that worked to train people from, so that's 8 people a year for a whole year's program, for actually a 2-year program, for 8 people a year. And over 5 years, I had 40 trained medical educators in all the departments in the medical school. So the wolves in my school were the medical education scholars that I put into a program and developed them and put them back out into the environment and let them do their work. So I had wolves in my school as a medical education scholars program. I'd be happy to talk with you in more detail about that. You can send people out to courses at AMI, at ASME, at different courses and different places in the Middle East have medical education courses. I know there's some at Egypt. I know there's some at, people are developing courses, bring in consultants, have workshops. The point here is to make people smarter, get people to disturb. As the point of taking courses and workshops and consultants is to disturb the equilibrium and to introduce wolves into your school. And finally, you can set up a task force. So for example, at every school, there's a handful of few people that are interested in assessment. There are some clinical teachers and some science teachers that like assessment. They're interested in assessment. You bring together 5 or 6 people and you tell them, you are now the assessment task force and your job is to get smart. For the next 8 months, the next year, you are to meet every week and to read literature and discuss assessment. And at the end of a year, to know what the status of assessment is in medical education worldwide. And to begin to apply those things in the school. But first, you set them to get smart, to learn. The first thing about developing medical education is to develop learning. So I'm going to skip this slide. And so leadership, to conclude, to summarize, leadership for wiki stick-it issues is about learning and making sense and taking informed action. Informed, so what is the informed step? What, so what, now what? That leadership sets conditions, doesn't push people, but it sets conditions for change. So you introduce wolves into the system. You don't change the river. Leadership helps people to perceive, understand, and take action to influence those conditions. You notice perceive is what? What do I perceive? What do I understand? So what do I understand? And now what action will I take? What? So what? Now what? What? So what? Now what? Stand in inquiry, take adaptive action, promote organization that bridges gaps between, it bridges differences, look for difference and bridge difference through connections. So today we explored inquiry, the definition of leadership, finite, infinite games, adaptive action, wicked issues, patterns, 3 kinds. I didn't do complex adaptive systems and decision map. That's for the next time. 3 kinds of change and building educational capacity. We did a lot today, and you were fantastic. You were very flexible and compatible and very, very generous with me in the time that we had. So I want to stop sharing and ask for final questions and comments. I know that you have questions and comments as we come to a conclusion. So this is your chance to be adaptive, to ask what, so what, and now what. This is your tool. That's your take-home skill, is to ask what, so what, and now what in leadership.
I think you know, such workshops are instrumental in bringing out what happens maybe subconsciously to the front, so that you can dissect it, and perhaps in the future you can be a little more aware of what actually is happening when you evaluate situations. Thank you.
Absolutely correct. And I want to mention that if you think this kind of workshop would be helpful at your school with your teachers, you can write to me. I'd be happy to work with you at your school. I think Khalid is correct that becoming aware and bringing out and bringing to the surface what you do, so that you can reflect on it and see it and work with it instead of just being automatic. We want to stop being automatic. We want to start being reflective leaders and thinking about what, so what, and now what. I think, thank you, Khalid, for your observation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Menen. It was excellent presentation. We enjoyed it a lot, and we will keep our collaboration together. And just let me introduce our new speaker, actually, Professor Odeh. He will talk about reflection on edu experience and educational leadership. Professor Odeh is innovation in the and technology management department, and he's international expert in urban planning, energy policy, sustainability, and innovation. So, Prof. Odeh, floor is yours. Now you can share.
Thank you, Dr. Abdul Halim. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Stewart. It was very inspirational. It's very hard to keep up with the rich information and inspiration that Stewart enlightened us, but I'll do my best. My presentation will be different. We can use metaphor for leadership. Building on the wolves and the rivers, I think in the last 20 years, I worked in engineering and sustainability with international organizations, but we use metaphor in our culture, and wolf is used in our culture. I remember even my mother used to when she wants to inspire somebody, it will tell him that be like a wolf. So I think wolf is used in a cultural context, which is interesting. We can talk about it later. Okay, I'll focus on AGU and the new normal and the very basic leadership notions that most of you will be familiar. I'll talk about some basically models of leadership and the context of leadership. There is scarcity of leaders. When in our culture, culturally speaking, there is contextual leadership and situational leadership or transformational leadership. So leadership is contextual. It depends on the ecosystem, not only on the species. And we talked about the rivers versus the wolves. But it's interesting to know that it's only 1% of the human capital are qualified to be leaders. So we are confronted with a challenge, which is we have always a need for inspiring and transformative leaders. It's a very complex issue. It's a wicked problem as well. The key question is, is there something called crisis-driven leadership? COVID-19 can inspire, chaos, disturbance, or we call it creative tension. In essence, innovation is defined as a creative destruction. Usually after a rainforest, there is a flood, there is always more innovation, more fertility after a flood. So the key question here, how the crisis or the challenge, the uncertainty after COVID-19 can offer a framework for fostering what I call transformative leadership, and also contextual leadership, or some people call it complexity or complex leadership. In terms of AGU, in a very simple manner, since I have limited time, we tried to focus on what we call the crisis-driven innovation model. Basically, we believe that leadership is contextual. It's about the ecosystem and species, the wolves and the rivers, but also it's about transactional. There is the component of transactionality, and there is a process of also complexity. Very simply, during the COVID-19, there was a lot of social distancing, a lot of changing of our paradigm. There was a lot of normality. And however, we tried to do some work. We tried to connect with the public sector in our innovation department. And also, I think the medical school did some research as well. But I'll talk about the innovation department of innovation as a member. We tried to approach the public sector, and we did a policy brief, and we did a research. We published research with our team at the Department of Innovation about the preparedness and the disruption of coping with disruption during COVID. So I think we tried to harness the crisis, the complexity, the chaos, to try to create knowledge. So which was very inspiring for us. COVID-19 was a source of an opportunity for us to work together as a team and to work with the public sector and to develop some policy briefs and publication. So that's one key message. So a crisis is an opportunity for collaboration. So in the information age, I mean, historically in the agricultural age, people used to manage labor. Then in the technological age, people used to manage technology. Later, people used to manage knowledge. Now we need to manage collaboration. So I think part of the new model of a new university or a future of university, we need to look at different paradigm of university that is a global university that is based on personalized learning, decentralized, and also based on what we are call just-in-time delivery. So the model of new model of delivery of information. I think also one key lesson that we try to approach in AGU is to focus on problem-based learning and project-based learning. We try to utilize our innovation lab and try to do design thinking and try to apply co-creation and learning. Anyway, during crisis, during COVID-19, there was a lot of complexity, what we call it uncertainty, ambiguity, complexity. So VUCA, the VUCA time. We live in a VUCA time. It's about volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. However, with time, we try to respond, we try to have our collective action and to have a system thinking to make sense of this chaos and working remotely. Again, VUCA time, the COVID-19 introduced uncertainty, which is basically not only uncertainty, but also volatility and complexity and ambiguity. We call it a VUCA time, a VUCA era. The VUCA era basically it's about, again, we call it far from equilibrium situation or unbounded rationality, unbounded rationality. So again, this is a typical change curve that Stewart talked about eloquently, static, dynamic, or dynamical change. We moved from the shock to denial. And I remember some people were saying we don't have to do online learning. 2 weeks we'll go back to normal. We resisted to go back to digital. It took us a while to accept to move from the shock to. We moved from 1 to 4. There was a state of depression. We needed the empathy. And I think with the singularity, with the convergence between technology and human, we need human empathy. And I think this is very critical for any institution. It's not only innovation, it's not about technology or institutional change. It's beyond that, it's about the human dimension. And I think this is very critical for any university, is to instill the sense of empathy and human solidarity. Again, we move now in 2021 on what we call integration and having decisions. We are now embarking on a process of reimagining higher education and reimagining AGU, our university, in terms of looking at a smart university versus sustainable university versus what we call a corporate, shall we move for a community university versus a corporate model or modular university. So I think now with the disruption, the uncertainty or VUCA era introduced now we are embarking on formulating a new strategy for AGU for the coming 3 years. And we are rethinking our business model in terms of who we are, what do we stand for, and so what, and what now. The AGU experience, as I just mentioned, it moved us from the innovation era, which is working with the public sector during crisis, trying to develop what we call co-creation of new knowledge and based on wisdom. And also trying to look at connecting the dots between public sector, private sector, and civil society. Also, it speeded up, it accelerated the digital transformation for learning and reflection. And also it enabled us to reflect on the use and value of adapting problem-based learning and project-based learning. And the key message also, it inspired us to move into what we call a learning organization by adopting system thinking, team learning, and also mental model, changing our mental model. So basically, this is the key notions that AGU now is trying to transform into what we call a learning organization by focusing on system thinking and team learning and changing our mental model. Again, adapt, looking at the big picture, the big trends, the what. Basically, we notice that there is asymmetry between the have and the have-nots in terms of digital divide. We notice there is a disruption. This is the framework that we used. And there is basically issues in terms of ability to access knowledge. And also we notice that there is age disparity. There is also people where there is changes in terms of the demographics, young and old. And also we noticed the polarization in terms of consensus at the global level, WHO, and we noticed the idea of you are struggling between either conspiracy theory versus fatalism versus rationalism. So I think university we have to say something about the global discourse and the global narrative of WHO and the global arena in terms of legitimacy, in terms of transparency of information or misinformation about the COVID-19. So it gives us the idea about the role of clean science, the role of ethical leadership and moral economy. And the last one is about technology and in terms of adapting appropriate technology. In transformation, change is only changing the hardware. Transformation is about changing the social DNA. So in AGIU, we are concerned with our social DNA. It is the transformation of a caterpillar to a butterfly. So we are looking not only to think out of the box, but also think within the boundaries of the inbox. Sometimes we are too attached to our problems. We see wicked problem, but we cannot tame our wicked problem. So we need to have a process of taming our wicked problem through having a time box, looking at what we call business challenges, hackathons, or design thinking in the innovation lab. We are trying to establish our social innovation lab and to try to have our time boundedness for the problem. Again, we use sandbox also and the space box to have ideas in one page, ideas in one idea in one A4 paper. So instead of lengthy dialogues, we try to focus on getting to the root cause of the problem, not the symptoms. Again, I think I will not allude to what Stewart talks about, the details about leadership. He already covered that, but I'll try to leave you with 5 ways. Since I have almost 10 minutes, I will conclude with what I call here 5 ways to lead in an era of transformation. Again, we're not talking about only change. It's about transformation. It's about a journey of disruptive innovation. So there are 5 ways to look at this era. One way is we need to inspire through purpose. So again, universities is about ideas. It's about, and ideas are founded in clouds. So we need to make sure that there is a purpose for our educational mission, for educational medical education and other departments. So this is very critical. One example is Lego company. Basically, the mission was to inspire and enable builders of tomorrow. And I think university is about building a vision for tomorrow, since imagination is more important than knowledge. So I think this is very critical for education to inspire thinkers and transformers of the conventional paradigm. Another notion is we need to go together to this challenge. You have to have collective action. You need to have all initiatives from all departments, from all colleges, and we need to invest in transformation and also try to bring more wolves. I think I can see from the pictures here, looking at the pictures of our medical staff, I can see many wolves at the NAGU. Again, there is self-awareness. Part of the COVID-19, it inspired us to have more self-consciousness, more mindfulness about who we are, what we do, and what do we stand for. Our values. We need to have a value-based organization. So people talk about market-based university. It's about entrepreneurship and funding and wealth creation. But I think university is beyond that. It's about, again, the consciousness. It's about value creation. The third component is about we need to enable people to succeed. We need to have the symphony of all people, from support staff, from admin, from all units of universities need to work together and to be empowered to have a shared vision and a collective action. So this is very critical. The fourth dimension is we need to instill a culture of constant learning. People now with the open sources, Coursera, Khan Academy, and Udacity, there is the teacher is not the center of knowledge. Now people have access to global knowledge and online sources. So we need to have the culture of constant learning and constant reflection, what we call a reflective practitioner. I think what we are trying to what we are seeing today is the idea of reflective practitioner, where you can have a community of practice, like the medical staff attending this workshop and trying to create knowledge or co-create knowledge. This type of a community of practice is an enabler to create or co-create new knowledge and a new inspiration for a new university that is smart, that is agile, and that is resilient. The fifth dimension is about inclusive leadership. You need to have inclusive leadership. You need to have leadership is not only about top management or financial management or marketing, but rather every single employee is part of leadership. So it's about collective leadership. It's about the ecosystem that brings the symphony of life, and it brings the transformation of a university. Again, AGU is about collective leadership. It's about a sense of direction, not only a sense of position. It's a dynamic. It's dynamic and dynamical. And also it's about cultivating collaborative culture. Diversity is critical, and AGU is a very diverse institution. And we see that diversity is a recipe for vitality and a recipe for success. And I think this is crucial in terms of a smart university. Restore, evolve, and transform. Now, I think after 2 years of COVID-19, we are in the process of transformation. We are evolving to rethinking our institutional mission and rethinking our social DNA. This is very basic. To conclude, I think this is a very standard leadership. Our emotional intelligence is crucial. In engineering or medical school, IQ is more important, but I think we believe now people believe that EQ is more important than IQ. We need to have soft skills, and we need to have a crucial issue for leadership. It's not about IQ, it's about EQ. So these are key simple issues for leadership. We need to understand the individual. Little things matter. You need to have strong commitments, and also show personal integrity. This is very basic. Again, in conclusion, we need to have also a win-win mindset. There is an abundance mentality. There's no scarcity of talent or ideas, since imagination is more important than knowledge. There is always infinite amount of ideas. The idea is how you harness these ideas and to make a difference, to add value. So there is abundance mentality within institutions. There's infinity. The idea of maturity, we now, AGU is at 40 years of operation. So after 40 years, now we are reflecting for a new era, a new trajectory. I will stop here for final messages. Thank you for enabling me to have this exposure. But I'll leave it now for a few minutes for our esteemed audience if there's some comments or reflections. So if there is any question, I'll be glad to respond.
Yes, Odeh, Professor Rami is here. Can I say something?
Absolutely, with pleasure.
Well, Odeh, thank you very much for the overview you have given us, and I really feel that this very important topic was just squeezed at the end in a very good manner, which I think we could have you could have much more clarification, which also was very important. Now, just I heard you saying that only 1% of the people they can be proper leaderships. Am I right in what I heard?
It's a cultural. It's part of culture. It's a cultural citation.
So that leads me to the my question. Now,
yes.
Out of this, how you could what in an Aflatonian city, what are the criteria by which these leaders are best selected? If my question is clear.
Thank you. Yes, very clear. Thank you, Dr. Rami. Thank you. This is maybe it takes too much time to elaborate, but I think this is very sound question. Well, basically, leadership is contextual and situational, so it's part of the ecosystem. Again, there's a lot of learning by doing. There's a lot of learning by hands. It's a pragmatism. So people evolve based on a crisis, based on situations, and based on global knowledge and exposure and diversity. So I think some argue that leadership is part of, it can be learned, it's part of experience, experiential. Some people argue partly also it's part of personality traits. There are some part of genetics, part of biological features, but it's a combination of both. If you have an average person, but you expose him to global knowledge, to global training, he's likely to be a renowned leader. So I think there are now schools and academies to nurture leadership. So I think there are different models of transformative leadership and also complex leadership that are based on structured learning. So I think it's doable. And we needed that. It's highly needed, but it's very scarce.
Thank you very much, Odeh. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rami.
I have another question, Dr. Odeh. Thank you very much for this distinguished and excellent presentation. What's your experience about the so-called shared leadership?
Interesting. I think I use the metaphor from culture. In our culture, we talk about leadership is a contextual. It's part of the ecosystem. So I think there should be something. I don't believe in the theory of big man theory or the charismatic leadership. There should be institutionalized leadership. So part of the challenge in many developing countries is that they look for a charismatic leader and a one man leader. I think now with the complexity, with the learning, you need to have a systemized, institutionalized, and contextual leadership that can build institutions. So leadership is more of enhancing the societal civic intelligence. It's about enhancing the multiple intelligences. So I think leadership is beyond one individual. It has to be institutionalized. It has to be deepened as part of the culture and strategy of the institution and the society.
Thank you. As well as the teamwork.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's shared, absolutely. Dr. Doifallah, if there is more questions, I'll be glad to answer them. You are on mute, Dr. Doifallah. Dr. Abdul Halim, you are on mute. Please unmute if you want.
Okay, thank you. Great, thanks, Professor Odeh. I think if there is any burning question, you can ask now to Prof. Odeh or to Professor Menen. Otherwise, we will like to thank both of them for this excellent workshop, and many thanks for all our participants from all over the EMRO region and GCC countries. We have participants from Bahrain here from the Arabian Gulf University, University of Bahrain, RCSI. We have participants from Qatar, Weill Cornell University, and College of Medicine in Qatar, also from Sudan, from Pakistan, from Sultan Qaboos, from Oman, and other people from the region. And at the end, on behalf of all members of the WHO collaborating centers at the Arabian Gulf University, would like to thank you all. Thanks for all members of the medical education department who helped in this conducting this, organizing the workshop. A special thanks to Ms. Sarah Al-Khazali, who also great help for organizing the workshop. Thank you all, and wish you a great day, and thanks a lot.
Thank you, Dr. Menen. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
Professor
Thank you,
Odeh.
everybody.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Cheers. Thank you all.